Welcome and good morning. My name is Debbie Raffel. I'm the director of the Department of Toxic Substances Control, and up here on the dais with me are some of my executive team. So I'll start on my right with Meredith Williams, who is our newest addition. She will be the deputy for the Safer Products and Workplace Program. We have Mr. Brian Johnson, who is the deputy for the Hazardous Waste Management Program. Miriam Ingenito, who is my chief deputy director. Stuart Black, who is the deputy for we call it the cleanup program. It has a much longer name than that, but that's okay. And Josh Tooker, who is my deputy for legislative affairs. We have some other deputies and staff in the audience with us who will be making presentations, but those are the folks with me up here today, and I want to welcome you to the meeting. Before we get started with the actual meat of the meeting, there are some logistical things that I need to talk about and inform you of. The first and important one is the restroom, which is out the door and to the left. We do not have a break planned for this meeting, so I would just invite you, if you feel the need, to get up and take care of your own needs. The other logistical of note is the emergency exit. So emergency exits, if anything should happen, if a siren goes off, we need to leave the room quickly. They're just back out the door to the right and down the stairs, and we go outside. They ask us to go outside. So what I'd like to do is start the meeting off talking about some of the logistical processes that will go on. We are not a board or commission. I don't think that will surprise anybody in the audience. We are a department, and as such, we don't have regular public meetings that have a large breadth in nature. It doesn't mean we don't do public engagement. DTSC, in fact, has many opportunities to engage with the public, but we don't have sort of the requirement to hold regular public meetings. And so what you're seeing today is our first go at this as a department, to try and increase the amount of transparency and understanding of who we are as a department, how we make our decisions, how we set our priorities. And we're doing that through this venue of a public meeting. It will not supplant any of the other public meetings that we have. It's simply an additional way of holding ourselves accountable to you, the public, and to give you the opportunity to hear not only from deputies, but from our staff as well. This meeting is being webcast, and I think there will be behind me an email address that if you are listening in by the web, I want to welcome you here and thank you for spending your morning with us, and invite you, if you have comments and questions, to use the email address that is up on the screen behind me. For those of you who made it to the headquarters building this morning, if you have comments or questions, the way we're going to take care of that today is with comment cards. And the comment cards, I understand, are in the back. Can somebody, a staff person, hold up one so that I can see what it looks like? Are they outside? They're still outside. So behind me, Jim Markson, my deputy for communications office, is holding up a comment card. If you would like to ask a question or make a comment about something on the agenda today, and there are 3 items on the agenda, we ask that you fill out that comment card and you raise it above your head, and one of the staff members will come and collect it from you. Those will come to me, and then I will simply read them off in an order, and we'll invite you to come up to the microphone and answer your question. Perfect opportunity for me to remind people that if you have a cell phone, please put it on mute, and considering that's probably every single person in the room, please do put those cell phones on mute so that we don't have to listen to your ringtone, no matter how interesting it might be. Okay, so a little more logistics. To make sure that we end this meeting in 3 hours, that is the goal. We have a lot to cover on the agenda. We weren't going to get through everything that DTSC does, so we picked what we thought for our first meeting were some of the more timely issues that we wanted to share. At the end of each section of the agenda, we will have a time for comment and questions, and it will be timed at 2 minutes. And the way you will know how close you are getting to that 2-minute mark is there will be on the screen a timer. And when you see it go from green to red, I'm going to ask that you wrap things up. So it's just a way of being fair to everyone in the room who would like to make a comment or a question, and gives us the opportunity to hear from as many people as possible, not only in the room but also online as well. So those of you who are joining us again on webcast, if you have a question or a comment, just go ahead and email it, and that will get to me up here on the dais, and I will I will read out what you write. And one other thing about the format of the meeting, I'm going to ask that everyone address their comments and questions to me. This is really my meeting as the director. My colleagues are here to support me, to answer detailed questions if they come up, and also, very importantly, to listen, to hear what you have to say, to hear concerns, and to take into account the questions you might have, the concerns about what we're doing, and to get a better understanding of what people are thinking about the work that we do. So please direct the questions and comments to me. I may or may not be able to answer them, and it may not be appropriate to answer them now. And so, for example, one of the things we're going to start off the agenda with is a broad time for broad public comment and questions for things that aren't on the agenda. And if there are comments on specific sites, if there are questions about activities that we're doing, don't expect answers today, but do expect answers from us. It is our commitment that we will get back to you in a different forum. We may choose to put one of those sites or one of those issues on a future agenda. We're here to listen, we're here to take note, and we're here to open up a dialogue. What you will find is that some of the issues that we cover here are in the early stages. That's the beauty of doing a public meeting like this. We can mix it up. We can have some things where we're just starting to understand what the issues are, get our arms around them, and we'll do other things that are more detailed updates on where we've been, what we've already made decisions on. So that's the nice thing about having an agenda like this, where it's not a hearing, it's a meeting. So we can be free with the agenda and put things on in future meetings that are of interest to the people of California, to those of you in the audience, to those of you on the web. So what I would like to invite you to do as you sit here and listen today, give us feedback. This is the first of this kind of public meeting for DTSC. We have a lot to learn about the meeting as much as we do about what your larger concerns are. So I hope that you will send us emails, you will call us, you will get in touch with us to help us make sure these meetings are of greatest use to you going forward. The next meeting will be roughly quarterly, so the next meeting will be in about 3 months from now, or early next year. Okay, so I think we're ready to get started. And the first item on the agenda, as I said, is that general public comment period. So what I'd like to do is ask anyone who has an issue that they'd like to share with us that is not on the agenda, so not the 3 items on the agenda, which are, for those of you who aren't aware, we have a legislative update, then we're going to go to an update on our safer consumer product regulation, implementation, and thirdly on the permit review. So if somebody has something they'd like to share, the microphone is there. You have 2 minutes, and if you are on the web, you'd like to send an email comment, please do so now. And so this would be a time when we're not looking for comment cards necessarily. You may come up and just introduce yourself. And I will give you a minute to do so. Okay, wonderful. So in that case, we will get started with the morning in earnest. And again, thank you all for being here. And I also want to just take a minute to thank our staff, my staff, that is either in the room or listening in on the web. One of the real benefits of doing a public meeting like this is not just so the public knows what's going on, but so staff knows what's going on. When you've got a large institution, and ours relatively speaking, in state government is small at about 950 people. But nonetheless, when you're spread out in 9 sites around the state, it's very easy for staff to get in their silos and not understand what the rest of their colleagues are doing. So this meeting serves multiple purposes of spreading information outside of the department and within the department. And so I'm grateful for all of my staff who took the time to be with us today. And along those lines, then, I would like to introduce my first colleague of the morning, which is Josh Tooker, who will talk and introduce his staff person about a legislative update. Josh?
Thank you. The Office of Legislation is the liaison between the department and the legislature. We provide a variety of information to legislative offices, from describing the programs that we administer to assisting them with constituent questions. Legislative offices may receive questions regarding a cleanup site that DTSC is involved in, or they may receive a question regarding a facility permitted by DTSC. Our office works with DTSC program staff to provide answers to the legislature on these and any questions that they have. Sure. Additionally, the Office of Legislation tracks all the bills that may have a potential impact to a DTSC program. We work with our program staff and legislative staff to help everyone understand what is current law and what the proposed change in law might mean. The legislature has oversight authority of state departments, and the DTSC Legislative Office works with the legislature to facilitate this oversight by coordinating meetings with policy, fiscal, and other legislative staff overseeing aspects of the department. This morning, Jacqueline Arnold, the manager in the DTSC Legislative Office, is here to speak about legislation affecting the department that was passed and signed into law by the governor this year.
Thanks, Jacqueline.
All right, can you hear me now? Great. All right, so we are at the end of the first year of a 2-year legislative session, 2013 through 2014. There were 2,540 bills and resolutions introduced this year in 2013, and DTSC tracked 127 of them. There were 1,003 bills chaptered into law, and 96 were vetoed. So Governor Brown had about a 91% signing rate for the bills that came across his desk. There were 7 bills chaptered that affect DTSC when statutes go into effect January 1st, 2014. So here are the 7 bills that Governor Brown signed into law which affect DTSC. AB 324, which addresses toxic materials in glass blasting beads. AB 440, which gives local agencies tools to address cleanup of hazardous materials at the local level. AB 501, which addresses toxic substances in brake friction materials on vehicles. AB 1329, which addresses hazardous waste and environmental justice. SB 4, which regulates hydraulic fracturing in oil and gas production. SB 429, which extends the operative time frame for the San Gabriel Basin Water Quality Authority Act. And finally, SB 483, which addresses hazardous materials in business and area plans for the Certified Unified Program Agencies. So in the interest of time, I'm not going to go over all of these. I'll just share some of the highlights. Okay. Oops, sorry about that. All right, first of all, I'd like to tell you about AB 440 by Assemblymember Gatto. The Polanco Redevelopment Act gave redevelopment agencies tools to clean up blighted properties. When that law was repealed and redevelopment agencies were dissolved, those cleanup tools went away as well. AB 440 provides local agencies with tools and immunities similar to what they had under the former Polanco Act as a means of cleaning up releases of hazardous materials and returning blighted property to beneficial use. One major difference is that previously there were about 400 redevelopment agencies under the Polanco Act that potentially could have used those cleanup tools. The scope is significantly expanded under AB 440 to all 58 counties, 482 municipalities, and about 70 housing authorities. So there's a total of about 610 local agencies, up from 400, that can now utilize these cleanup provisions. So that highlights the importance of both DTSC and the State Water Resources Control Board working with the local agencies on their individual cleanup plans. All right. AB 1329 by Assembly Member V. Manuel Perez requires DTSC to prioritize an enforcement action affecting communities that have been identified by Cali, PA as being the most impacted environmental justice communities. DTSC will identify and consider the environmental justice status of a community as a factor in the prioritization of our inspection, enforcement, and complaint response activities. DTSC has been part of a multimedia Cali, PA effort to target inspection and enforcement activities in impacted communities, including environmental justice communities. With AB 1329, DTSC will continue these efforts and will use the knowledge we gain from these activities to improve our efforts in environmental justice communities. SB 4 by Senator Pavley sets in motion a process to regulate hydraulic fracturing, also known as fracking, which covers a broad range of processes used to enhance the extraction of underground resources, including oil, natural gas, and even water. This bill addresses fracking of oil and gas production wells. The oil and gas industry uses hydraulic fracturing to open up underground fractures in rock formations to allow oil or natural gas to move more freely up to production wells that bring the oil or gas to the surface. SB 4 requires the Division of Oil, Gas, and Geothermal Resources within the Natural Resources Agency to adopt regulations on fracking by January 5th of 2015 in consultation with DTSC and other relevant departments. The bill also requires DTSC to enter into a formal agreement with the division that specifies authorities and responsibilities of each agency. DTSC will continue to be an active partner with the Division of Oil and Gas and will provide expertise as needed while the division moves forward with their regulatory process. DTSC's role in the fracking process is the same role for the entire production well process. When any well operator, with or without hydraulic fracturing fluids, generates a waste, that generator is required to determine whether that waste is hazardous. If the waste is hazardous, then it has to be managed according to DTSC's hazardous waste laws and regulations. Basically, that hazardous waste needs to be on a manifest, and it needs to be transported by a licensed hauler to a facility that is permitted to accept hazardous waste. The well stimulation process will continue to be overseen by the Division of Oil, Gas, and Geothermal Resources. So what's next? These statutes take effect on January 1st of 2014, and there are a number of bills that were introduced this past year in 2013 which did not meet certain legislative deadlines. When the legislature returns on January 6th, these two-year bills are once again active, and legislators will decide whether they want to move those bills forward, either as they're currently written or with amendments. The legislature has until January 31st to pass a two-year bill out of the legislative house in which it was introduced. For example, if it's a Senate bill, the senator has until January 31st to get that bill passed through the Senate policy committees, fiscal committees, a vote of the full Senate, and then move it forward to the Assembly to go through the same process again in the other house. Members have until February 21st to introduce new bills for 2014. So it's possible we could see another 2,500 bills like we did this year. So if you have any questions, if you'd like more information on any of these bills, we have a report online, our legislative mandates report that discusses these bills in a bit more detail. It's up on our website at the address you see on this slide. And additionally, you'll see that my email address is provided, so if anyone has questions related to legislation, you can feel free to send them to me. That is all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Yes, you guys were busy with sorting through bills. It's amazing that, in a way, so few at the end of it had a lot of impact on us, but it's always important to sort through. So, Josh, any comments or thoughts on what you just heard? More questions?
Nothing at this time. I think Jacqueline covered all the bills and everything, and I think it's going to be an interesting 2014.
Okay. Any questions from my colleagues on the dais about what's awaiting us? I'm sure that there are people out in the audience who have ideas for legislation and are working on them, and we will be working in concert with anyone who is interested in working with us on bills. So thank you, Jacqueline. Now what I'd like to do is ask if there is any public comment or questions about legislation, particular bills that Jacqueline talked about. There's a whole range of things from the cleanup side to the fracking side that impact DTSC. So I've got one from on fracking. It says, how is DTSC being involved on the new state bill in regards to this issue? Is DTSC providing comments to the bill? So there is a new bill. There are a number of interest in fracking, and the question, I think, is what is DTSC's role? And when we are brought in as an advisor, as we were in SB 4, to serve in an advisory capacity through our expertise, we have been working closely with, we call them DOGGR, the Division of Oil, Gas, and Gas, as well as other Cal EPA entities. Rick, do you want to add anything to that? And Josh, before you do, Rick, I'm going to ask Josh to weigh in on how our role is. And Rick, so the reason I brought Rick up here is that he is one of the liaisons on the issue on fracking. So I'll give him the opportunity if he wants to add to anything that Josh says. Go ahead, Josh.
I'm not completely sure if they mean the new bill is the SB 4 that will take effect this January. So it was signed by the governor, and it's not yet fully effect. It takes effect January 1, 2014. And we will be working with the Division of Oil and Gas and Geothermal Resources as that bill. And the division is required to do regulations, and so we will be working with them throughout the year on those regulations. If there are any new bills on the fracking process introduced in 2014, we will obviously work with the legislature if they have questions or comments on our role, or as it could impact any programs we have in the department. We will definitely work with the legislature on any bills introduced next year as well.
Gosh.
Great.
Sorry,
And then
Rick?
the only thing I would add is that the DOGGR has already proposed a set of draft regulations, as well as put out onto the street some emergency regulations. So we are actively looking at those. We've also been involved in several meetings with DOGGR themselves to talk about the scope and the issues related to fracking, so that we can identify areas where our regulatory authorities come to bear and ensure that our regulatory interests are covered in their regulations as well as in our programmatic efforts.
Thank you. So since I happen to know this person who put this card up, you're welcome to come and ask your question if you'd like to. Go to the mic. So I'm going to call up Gene Livingston, who I saw here, to ask his question, rather than me read it.
All right. It's probably more understandable than my writing. So my question is, are you planning to introduce any legislation or any legislative concepts in 2014?
Yeah, that is absolutely under discussion at this point. We're looking at what our needs are, whether it's safer consumer products or anything else, taking a look at where we are in implementation and looking at what might be of use. Josh, do you want to add anything to that?
Sure. Thank you, Gene, for that question. We are in the process of going through any potential legislative concepts and proposals, and if we have any legislative proposals, they would be working with the governor's office and sometime before the legislative deadline to introduce new bills, which is February 21st.
Any other questions or thoughts about legislation? Yes, but we're going over on that side, if you don't mind. Go ahead, and since I don't have a card for you, if you could just introduce yourself.
Ingrid Bostrom with the Center on Race, Poverty, and the Environment. And actually I'm not sure who the clerk is because this is a new process, and this is
Yes.
actually a request to, after this item,
Yeah,
to move back to the general public comment, because we had a couple people come up
Yeah.
from Kettleman City who I think would have liked that
I think that's a
opportunity.
good idea.
So I just
yeah.
wanted to put that out there.
No, I think that's an outstanding idea, and because I have the ability to do that, I am happy to do that because we are moving a little faster than we needed to. Yes?
Good morning, Bill McGavin, Coalition for Clean Air. I have a question about AB 440. Given that it vastly expands the number of local government entities that can oversee cleanups, how is the department going to make sure that those cleanups are properly carried out, and do you have expanded personnel to allow you to do that?
Great question. Actually, I think that is something we can talk about. So, Josh, why don't you start, and then Stu, why don't you take over?
The first part of the question, I believe, yes, we are looking at the scope of the AB 440, and of course it takes effect in January. And I believe Stuart can potentially talk to anything about the amount of program staff we have. But we are actively working with the Water Board and other stakeholders to make sure that the bill is implemented smoothly. The bill does provide for a lot of new oversight from the department and the Water Board that was not previously under the Polanco Act. So we will be working with all of the local entities to ensure that the process moves smoothly going forward.
It is a good question. We've been concerned about it as the bill was working its way through the process. As Josh said, we worked extensively, both DTSC and the Water Board worked extensively with the Governor's Office and the authors to, number one, make sure that there was a clear process for oversight of the work plans that would be submitted to us so that we'd make sure that these cleanups are done properly. As you know, with the reduction in the economy over the years and now it's starting to come back, I feel that the staffing, at least at this time, is appropriate. We've been planning for this, and we are ready to be able to shift staff to take on the added work, which we hope there'll be added work. We'd like to see these brownfields move forward. In addition to that, most of the brownfields do have a funding source. We do voluntary cleanup agreements with most brownfield operators, and with that, we work with Sarah, we work with Andrew, with our administrative staff. If it looks like we need additional resources, we can use that additional funding that's provided to prove that we need those resources, and we can ask for the additional resources that we may need. I don't anticipate it's going to be a landslide. I think it's going to kind of be an upslope, so I think we'll have some time to address it.
Yeah. It will be an interesting journey to see how that plays out. Anything else on this item? Okay, then because I do have the discretion of being the chair, I'm going to do something a little different on the agenda. I want to go backwards, and we're a little bit ahead of our schedule, and so I want to make sure that people who did, and I happen to recognize some people who I know came here from afar, and things are near and dear to their hearts that are not on the agenda, and I want to give them the chance to address me and address the public. And so what we're going to do now is open up the mic for general comments that are not on the agenda. There's a 2-minute time period, and we do not have at this point a translator. So we had asked if there was translation needed. We didn't get a response, and so unfortunately we don't have one here. So if you could help with translation, that would be great. So those who came would like to come to the mic. Yeah, that would be great. Thank you for the cards. Okay. So, Maria Saucedo?
Buenos días a todos. Mi nombre es María Saucedo.
Good morning to all. My name is Maria Saucedo.
Yo pienso que ya muchos de ustedes me conocen.
I think many of you know me already.
La última vez que yo vine a esta audiencia, estaba embarazada de esta bebé.
The last time I came to meet with you, I was pregnant with this baby.
Y ustedes la miran muy sana, pero a los 2 meses ella estuvo internada en el hospital porque no podía respirar.
And you may see her very healthy. But at 2 months, she was hospitalized because she had breathing problems.
Y yo vengo a preguntarles a todos ustedes qué es lo que ha pasado con el permiso que les aprobaron a King Waste.
I come to ask all of you what happened with the permit that you granted to Chem Waste.
Y la señora Rafael prometió ayudarnos. Ella estuvo conmigo hace como 2 años y prometió hacer algo por nosotros aquí en Mass City.
Mrs. Rafael was with us 2 years ago in Kettleman City and promised to do something for us.
Y desgraciadamente siguen muriendo gente y los niños siguen naciendo mal y enfermos.
Unfortunately, people keep dying and there's children that continue to be born with problems.
Y yo quisiera que ya no pasara, pero desgraciadamente sigue pasando y les pido encarecidamente que hagan algo.
I wish it didn't keep happening, but unfortunately it keeps happening and I'm here to ask you to do something.
No quiero que esta bebé también se me muera.
I don't want this baby to die also.
Gracias por escucharnos y esperamos que nos ayuden.
Thank you for listening to us and we hope that you help us.
Thank you. Oh, okay, we have a translator here, I don't know, Maricela, if you, so Maricela Maris Altore.
Good morning, Marisela Mares Alatorre. I'm with People for Clean Air and Water of Kettleman City, and I work for Green Action for Health and Environmental Justice. And I'm here to let DTSC how disappointed I know I am for their permit decision on the KC Kettleman City hazardous landfill. I feel like DTSC has continuously paid lip service to environmental justice, but when it comes down to protecting the most vulnerable communities, communities that even EPA acknowledges are vulnerable through their Cal Enviro Screen tool, and other environmental justice tools have also designated us as a vulnerable community. And yet these permit decisions are being made to continue to dump in our community. Not only to continue to dump, but to increase what's already there. I don't know what an environmental justice community looks like if it isn't Kettleman City. We have pesticides in the agricultural land surrounding us. We have 1,000 trucks every 12 hours passing through the town. We have the largest hazardous waste landfill west of the Mississippi, and we have a sludge coming from Los Angeles. In addition to that, they're fracking, and if they find enough petroleum to make it worth their time, they're going to put a refinery in our town. It would be much easier for you to drop a bomb on us because people continue to be sick in our town. There have been 2 children now that have leukemia, and it was in utero. So we know that there's something wrong, and those weren't counted on the study that was done. I'm sorry, I'm going to take a little bit more time because I feel like DTSC isn't following the laws, so I want the same privileges that DTSC has. There's been so many broken promises. In addition, Debbie, you promised us that there would be a cumulative health impact study done to help you with the permit decision. And that wasn't done. What was put out when you announced the draft permit decision was a environmental justice study, which was totally bogus. And you didn't come through on the cumulative health impacts report. And that's very important to us because we feel like we're in this situation where we don't know what's caused the children to have birth defects in Kettleman City. We don't know what's caused the leukemia in utero. We don't know what's caused healthy people in their 40s to drop from cancer in Kettleman City. But we know that something is going on. And you needed to look into that with all your conscience by doing a cumulative health impact study. That wasn't done. I want to know if that's even a possibility now at this point. I think it's also an outrage that you would even consider that permit because you're using this health study that was done on the mothers, but you know very well that the conditions under which it was done were nowhere near the conditions how they were when these children were conceived, when the dump was at 100% capacity. When you did the study, the dump was down to 25%. It's apples and oranges. You can't compare that. Additionally, I want to know why DTSC doesn't have to follow civil rights laws. There were so many civil rights violations during the permit process. Are you exempt from the law? I mean, how does one get exempt from the law? How do I do that? Because there's some things that I'd really like to do that are not legal. I'd like to know how DTSC gets that privilege, because I thought that they had to follow the laws just like everybody else in this country. And then I know that you say that you're considering environmental justice out there, but it just doesn't seem like it. And we have a tradition in the Mexican culture where we give posadas. We give a little candy bag during Christmas. And I bought you a candy bag. It's toxic waste, nuclear sludge, cherry sour candy. And I hope that you enjoy one of these for each of the children that have died in Kettleman City, and each of the children that has gotten sick, that has gotten cancer, that 9-year-olds with lumps in their breast. I hope you enjoy one candy for each of those kids. Thank you.
Thank you, Maricela. Thank you. Okay. Any other public comments that are not on the agenda? One more. And don't forget to give a card, if you can, to who. I need to know who gets the cards. Way in the back. There we go, in the back. Thank you. Go ahead.
Ingrid Brostrom with the Center on Raised Poverty and the Environment. And I'd also like to just talk about Kettleman City just briefly as DTSC continues to move forward with its permitting process. Something that I really would like a specific response to, and this is even outside of the permitting context, is the request for a comprehensive health survey in town. We've heard for many, many years of people complaining to DTSC, bringing people to DTSC's attention that have suffered unexplained illness, things that seem to be associated with environmental toxins and environmental exposures. And something that was submitted along with the permitting process was a questionnaire that uncovered the fact that the longer that people lived in Kettleman City, the higher incidence of environmental related illness, such as cancers, miscarriages, birth defects, anemia, and asthma. The questionnaire also uncovered that there were much higher levels of cancer in Kettleman and at lower ages than was previously identified in some of the studies used by DTSC. So we think that there is a serious health issue and a health crisis in Kettleman City. We have asked all the agencies, and especially DTSC, to come in and do a comprehensive health survey, and that is yet to be done. And as DTSC continues to move forward with permitting, the largest hazardous waste dump to continue into the foreseeable future, it is imperative that DTSC look before it makes this action and takes this action to see what the real health consequences are in Kettleman City. Thanks.
Thank you, and thank you to the three speakers. I am thrilled to see your baby, Maria, and to see it healthy now. I'm very grateful to that. I certainly do not want anyone to be sick from any industry that we regulate. And it is important that that everyone knows that we are working incredibly well and very closely with the Department of Public Health to look at health impacts of the community. As was said by the speakers, the facility that we regulate is one of many facilities and many impacts that the community faces. It's not just the chem waste facility. And so it becomes very important for us as a department to be looking at and working with the other state entities whose job it is to regulate and protect communities from the kinds of activities under their purview, whether they be air or water or pesticides. So we take this very seriously. Thank you for coming. Okay, I have a couple more. I have from the email. Is there any legislation to streamline all the hazmat and haz-waste business laws? Wow. To make it easier for businesses to comply with the many different DTSC laws, rules, and regulations. So that is a question about, if I could paraphrase the question, saying There's a lot of complexity there, a lot of variety of laws that businesses must look at and must comply with. Is there any plan for legislation to look at streamlining? There have been efforts looked at. We've been working very closely with what we call the CUPAs, the Certified Unified Program Agencies. Those are our local government partners to try and identify areas where there are laws that don't make sense, things that get in the way of compliance, and we continue to look for those opportunities. One of the things we have done in our reorganization of our department is create our hazardous waste management program, and that next to me here is Brian Johnson. And Brian, do you want to comment on that question?
Thank you, Director. We have been working fairly intensively recently with our CUPAs, meeting with the CUPA Forum Board, which is probably the best entree into the 80-plus CUPAs, the local agencies that implement these 6 programs statewide. And there is a sense amongst the CUPAs that they are reaching sort of a beyond adolescent stage where they think they are doing a pretty good job. They need DTSC support and interpretation kinds of work to help them out, and we are working with them in that arena. So we're enjoying both the benefits and the challenges of having 80 different agencies implement one set of laws, and we are focused right now on the challenges. We are looking for consistency to generally raise the bar of CUPA's performance. There are some that perform very well, and we want all of them at that level, and that is our goal right now.
Thank you. Josh, do you want to have the final word on that legislative idea?
Sure, thank you. And a bill proposal such as that, I have not heard of any bill that meets that information that was introduced in 2013, so there may be a couple thousand new bills introduced in 2014, so there may be a new one on the horizon. And I believe in the past, through the Governor's Office of Economic Development, I think it's GoBiz is the acronym, there is some permit-related assistance that is to help identify the various permits from various regulatory agencies, such as us, such as DTSC, that is available to businesses to help with that, understanding what is needed and required.
Thank you, Josh. Okay, so let's move on to the next item on our agenda, and that is going to be an update on the Safer Consumer Product regulations and their implementation. Now it's not on regulation development, but it's on what are we doing to actually put these in motion. And it's with great pleasure that I introduce to you, in her first public meeting as a DTSC person, Dr. Meredith Williams.
Thank you, Director Rafael. I'm very excited to be here and to have the opportunity to work on the Safer Consumer Products regulations. The regulations were drafted to implement AB 1879, and they represent a truly new paradigm shift in chemicals policy and a major step toward promoting safer substitutes for hazardous materials in consumer products sold in California. The regulations became effective on October 1st of this year, and we're now actively working to implement the first phases of the program. I'd like to introduce Carl Palmer. Carl is the chief of our Safer Consumer Products branch, and he will provide an overview of our current efforts to implement the new regulations. Carl.
Thank you, Meredith. Thank you, Director. First, I want to just acknowledge and thank all my colleagues within DTSC and the external stakeholders who got us to where we are today. It's an amazing effort, a collaborative effort, and very important to the next phase, which is actually implementing these groundbreaking regs. And so I'm going to thank in advance all those same people for sticking with us as we do implementation that I'm going to start talking about, because we're going to need a lot of input to get this right. So I'm going to give an overview of the basic parts of the regulations and what we're doing to implement them. So essentially, the regulations can be broken down into 4 main parts. The first part is really about identifying candidate chemicals. And what we're doing is identifying specific chemicals that contain one or more hazard traits of interest. And that would be something like it's a carcinogen or mutagen, reproductive toxin. So we're identifying those chemicals. The second part of the regulations is identifying what we call priority products, consumer products that contain one or more of those candidate chemicals. And I'm going to talk about that. The third part of the regulations is requiring that the people that make those priority products then go through what we call an alternatives analysis to evaluate, are there safer alternatives and not regrettable substitutions in that process that can move forward and create safer consumer products for our environment and for our people. And finally, the other key element in the regs I'm going to discuss is what we call regulatory responses. When we evaluate those alternatives analysis, if we feel that there's a need to impose a requirement on that manufacturer that protects human health and the environment. Those are the four key parts of the regulation. So the first part, candidate chemicals. So our regulations identified 23 different lists established by various authoritative bodies throughout the world that identified chemicals, and there's two types of lists. The first types of lists, if you look at the bubble on the left, identify chemicals based on their hazard trait. Is the chemical a carcinogen? Is it a reproductive toxicant? There's a variety of hazard traits that we're looking at. The other type of lists are based on the potential exposure pathways of those chemicals. And if you look at the bubble on the right, we pulled in lists that, like our California biomonitoring list, and looking at the Water Board and Air Board's air toxicant and water quality lists to demonstrate that those chemicals actually have a pathway through the environment to the environment and people. Collectively, these lists identify about 1,100 chemicals, and those chemicals provide the menu of what we call candidate chemicals that we can select from in choosing priority products. Now, it's important to note that for the first round of priority product selection, we've identified in the regulations a smaller subset of that broader list of candidate chemicals we call the initial candidate chemical list. And that's chemicals that are on the chemical is on both one of the hazard trait lists and one of the exposure lists. And so that subset is as small as about 150 chemicals of that menu. So that's the menu overall. So how do we share this information with people? So at the end of September, we launched our new Safer Consumer Products website. And on that website, there were three main things. First, we identified the candidate chemicals themselves. And you could go on our website and you could download a PDF or an Excel file of all the chemicals and look at them. But probably more effectively, you can use what we launched, which is our searchable database. And that database provides an opportunity for you to go in and you can type in either a chemical name or a CAS number and see if that chemical is one of the chemicals on our candidate chemical list. You can identify if it's on our short list of initial candidate chemicals. And you can also get the basis for that listing. What are the hazard traits that we're concerned about? Why is it on the list? And which list did it come from? It's very useful. Additionally, we launched our Toxics Information Clearinghouse. And in conjunction with our colleagues at the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment, we launched the Toxics Information Clearinghouse as required by SB 509. And what that is, it's a resource, it's a portal to lots of other information and other sources of chemical data, both on toxics endpoints, hazard trait characteristics, exposure properties and pathways. And this clearinghouse, in conjunction with our candidate chemical list, provides a tool for designers and manufacturers to look to get good information on chemicals that they might put in their product to see if it's on our candidate chemical list. So if they're looking for a safer substitute, they might want to look at that list and say, have we already identified that chemical might be a potential problem? So what are the next step is identifying the priority products. So how do we identify priority products? The regulations provide a couple of key prioritization principles, and those are basically, there are two main factors: potential exposure of the candidate chemical in the product and potential for that exposure to contribute to or cause significant adverse impact. Now that's a pretty broad criteria. Breaking it down a little more specifically, our regulations highlight certain factors that we're going to consider. These include the intrinsic properties of the chemical, things like its hazard traits and environmental and toxicological endpoints. Also includes any potential impact on sensitive subpopulations like pregnant women, elderly, children. It also includes the consideration of the market presence. Is this a product that's widely distributed and used in California? And finally, an important factor is that we consider the whole life cycle of that product, from cradle to grave, its use, and potential impacts throughout its life cycle, including end of life. A couple other considerations that I wanted to highlight are what I would call practical considerations. One is we're only required to look at the information that we have. We're not going out and generating new data and researching things. We're looking at available, reliable information. We're also looking at how these products are regulated by other state and federal organizations to ensure that we're not duplicating efforts, but if we do something that's regulated by someone else, we must only be looking at things in consideration of the same chemical for the same endpoint, and if it's adequately meeting the goals of that regulatory body and the considerations that we're interested in. So we're not going to duplicate. Now, staff have been working very diligently conducting research on all of these factors over a wide variety of potential products. And we're going to roll those up into some recommendations to you, Director Rafael, that will be consistent with our regulation. So the next question is, well, what are those priority products? That's what everyone wants to know. I'm not going to tell you that today, but I'm going to tell you when we're going to tell you that and how we're going to go through that process. So essentially, we're required in our regulations to come out with our draft list prior to April of 2014. So sometime after the first of the year, we will come out with our draft priority products. And there will be no more than 5. There'll be 5 potential priority products on that list. How do we get that list, and how are we going to go through that process? Well, it's going to be a very public process. We're not required to, but we're going to put the list out, and we're going to have an opportunity to get input on this list, because we're pretty confident that people will have a lot of opinions about these things, and we'll want to provide us with data and information that will help close potential data gaps, will give us insights that maybe we hadn't considered, and will ensure that we have good information for decision making. Additionally, because each of these priority products is going to be adopted formally in regulations, we're going to go through the whole APA process for each of these. So that, of course, entails a formal public notice, response to comments, going through CEQA. We'll also be working to do an economic analysis, and we'll be going before the Environmental Policy Council to address the question of whether we need to do a multimedia life cycle assessment for these priority products. And this process, once we go to formal rulemaking, will take about a year. So one thing I want to highlight is that it's important. These things aren't just going to hit the street and be in force. There's going to be an open, transparent process that we go about to identify which these priority products are, and they'll be formally in regulation. Concurrently, we're going to be working on developing a 3-year work plan for categories of future potential priority products. And that work plan will be adopted before October of next year. So in the dynamic of when we're getting information about the strength or weakness of some of these products, we will probably identify some other ones that might be good candidates, and we'll evaluate those in the work plan process. Okay, so that's how we're going to determine what those priority products are. The next stage is conducting alternatives analysis. And once the priority products are adopted in the rulemaking, probably somewhere mid-2015, that's when the time clock kicks in for those manufacturers of those priority products to do alternatives analysis. And essentially, the primary goal of doing an alternatives analysis is to support informed decision-making, resulting in safer products and the avoidance of regrettable substitutions. Now, the process is a pretty detailed process, and it's outlined in our regulations. And in summary, I can say that what it does is it takes the 13 specific criteria identified in the statute, and collectively, we're going to use those to assess the life cycle impact of that priority product and its potential alternatives. And that means that we're going to go through everything from raw materials extraction to manufacture to distribution to use to repair and maintenance, and ultimately to the end of life or recycling of that product. So this is groundbreaking work. This is not just an alternatives assessment for a narrow scope of factors, but it's extremely broad and deep. So The challenge there is we're going to be working with the manufacturers to do that. We're now in the process of developing guidance on how to get through that process that's outlined in the regulations. So those next steps are going to include a couple of key things. One, we're in the process right now of reestablishing or reconvening the Green Ribbon Science Panel. This is going to be a little smaller group of folks, and our first priority is going to be to work with us on developing this alternatives analysis guidance. So that's going to be a really important step to get good sound science behind it and to help us with some of the tough questions on how you approach this process so that we can put that on paper, give good examples, tools, and other things for the responsible entities to do a good alternatives analysis. So that time frame is we're going to be coming out this spring with our first set of part of that guidance, and we're going to have, again, in that very public process, we'll probably have some workshops and potentially webinars that will go through our draft guidance and give us input so that we can make this a very practical, workable document. And ultimately, we'll finalize that before the priority products are finalized, probably late next year, early the following year. The final component of the regulations is the regulatory response aspect. I'm not going to spend much time on this other than to describe briefly what that means is that once we receive the alternatives analysis reports from the responsible entities, then we'll be evaluating whether we think there needs to be some response to protect people or the environment. And we have identified in statute, we have in our regulations a number of tools that we can use. And they basically range from getting additional information, either for us or for the public, the consumer, or requiring that modifications to that product be made, either in itself or ultimately restricting or banning the sale of that product. So at this point, we're not spending much time on that because we've got a lot of other work to do, and this is going to be well down the road. But that's where we'll ultimately end up. I wanted to highlight a few other things that are going on. We are also working diligently to establish an information management system that will ensure that we have the tools to manage documents, protect trade secret information, track our work, and manage all of our workflow throughout this process. There's going to be a lot of information that we're managing. So we're working on phasing that process in. I also wanted to highlight that we have an existing memorandum of understanding with US EPA. That's been a real benefit to us because it's provided a more formal agreement with them to share information and to work with us as we're moving through this process. I also wanted to highlight one of the best things about it is that we have an interagency personnel agreement bringing Eileen Sheehan from Region 9, and she's been a huge help to me personally and to our program in getting where we are and moving forward. So thank you, Eileen and US EPA. I also wanted to note that we're working with a whole myriad of other states, organizations, industry, academic, NGOs, such as the Interstate Chemicals Clearinghouse, the National Academy of Sciences, BizNGO, and others, to talk about the alternatives analysis process, to learn in this community of practice, this new kind of tool and how it's going to be used, both here in California under the guidelines of our regulation, but also throughout the world, because this is new processes and techniques that are being developed. So we're in tune with that. There's a lot of dialogue between all the stakeholders trying to make sure that we develop good procedures. Ours will be a little different than most because as I alluded to earlier, our requirements are very broad and deep, more so in terms of a regulatory requirement than anywhere else in the world. So I just wanted to touch base briefly, all the things that I've talked about we're doing, but what's actually going on out on the street there right now. So in case you hadn't noticed in your October issue of Floor Covering Weekly, there was a small article that really highlighted that for floor covering adhesives, there's a couple of chemicals broadly used that are on our candidate chemical list. And at the same time, the article noted that there are already alternatives to those products that contain safer chemicals. So this is just one little example of what's going on out there in the market, that people who manufacture, use, make day to day these materials, as well as the people that buy them, are looking at the need and the desire for safer products. So our hope is that as we move forward, that We will be pushing people to innovation. We'll be working with people to collaborate on good knowledge and the development of new processes. We're very excited about it. There's a lot of work to do, so thanks in advance to all the stakeholders. But we're hoping that we'll have a safer environment and better health. So that's it.
Thank you, Carl. Don't go away just yet. I do want to notice that on the Floor Covering Weekly, I noticed on the banner it says, "We'll feed you great knowledge and lunch." So clearly, for floor covering people, the best way to get them to meetings is to feed them as well. So just like any other meeting. So you mentioned the Green Ribbon Science Panel, and I think there was a notice on there on the timing of the meeting. I'm not sure you talked about it. Can you talk about the next meeting, and then can you also let us know, I'd like to know, I know that we've selected the panel. Can you talk about the size of it and when that will get posted on the web so people will know who's on it?
Okay, yes, the first meeting is scheduled for the 29th and 30th of January here, and all are welcome. We'll be posting on our website more details on the agenda and specifics, but its focus will be looking at the alternatives analysis guidance development and process.
Okay.
And the size of the Green Ribbon Science Panel is going to be 15 members, which is considerably smaller than our former body, in part to make it focused and lean, and we have limited resources, so managing 30 plus people in an advisory group is tough. And we selected those people with the focus on meeting both the criteria in the statute that says what skill sets they're supposed to have, and our emphasis on looking at the alternatives analysis process.
Great.
And so the announcement should come out this week, I think. I think everyone's been notified, but I don't think we've posted yet who those people are, but stay tuned on the website.
And it's a mixture of perspectives, industry.
Oh, yes, yeah, it's industry, academics, practical business on the ground, some government folks as well, and a broad set of scientific policy background that I think is going to be very helpful to us in tackling the guidance.
I know we very much appreciated the Green Ribbon Science Panel's expertise getting the regs developed, so now it's equally, if not more important, to get real-world knowledge in that room.
Yes,
yeah.
And we have a very specific focus and time frame, so I think that will be helpful as well.
Okay. Meredith, do you have any closing thoughts? Okay, so thank you, Carl.
Thank you.
Before we open it up to questions and comments on this, I just want to say from a very personal perspective that as we hear Maria's baby, whose name I don't know, what is your baby's name? Tonansing? When we hear Tonansing's voice, it reminds us why we're doing this work. It reminds us of the importance not only in our department to clean up the sins of the past, Stu's job, to protect from the sins of the present, Brian's job, but also to prevent contamination in the future. And that's what this is about, whether it's looking at what is in, as Maricela said, preborn babies contamination, or future babies and all of us. So it's very important work, and thank you for bringing your child here, and to remind all of us and to ground us in the importance of the work that's before us, especially as we go into the next agenda item. But before we go into the next agenda item, I want to ask if there are any comments or questions on the Safer Consumer Products program that we can address. And if you have any cards, I've got one from online. I'm going to read it, this one. It says, recent public statements by Director Rafael have mentioned mercury-containing lighting as a likely product category to be considered in the green chemistry process. Can you please clarify the department's view of mercury-containing lamps as priority products? Yeah, it's fascinating. When I give talks on this subject, I have to make it concrete, so I use examples. And I think my carpet adhesive example, which I've used hundreds of times, have made it into Floor Covering Weekly. So they paid attention to that one. The lighting, I see that no more likely, no less likely than any of the other potential products. Fluorescent lighting has a problem at the end of life with mercury, just like carpet adhesive has a problem with formaldehyde during use. So those are the kinds of products we're looking at, and we will, right now what we're doing is taking a look at all the information we have and determining what makes sense for our first products out the door. We want to make sure that we have a success, and we want to choose products wisely. What was the word, Carl? What happened to Carl? What was the word you used? You used a wonderful word that, yeah, I don't know. Wise was probably the word Carl kept using, but it was a good one to think about and be centered. Are there any other comments or questions? Yes, go ahead. And I cannot
Director.
see, so lesson learned, I cannot see the screen behind me for the timing on 2 minutes. So this is the honor system. Or you guys can wave when it's time to.
I'm Gene Livingston with Greenberg Detroit. I just had a question about the rulemaking process on the priority products. Do you anticipate doing workshops in advance of a formal notice, or are you going to go straight to a formal notice on the regulations?
So that's a great question. Carl, do you want to answer that real quick?
Thanks, Gene. Yes, we haven't decided exactly how we're going to do the dialogue. We will post out our draft list publicly, and then we'll either have workshops, webinars, combination. We are going to get input prior to going to formal rulemaking because we think that's important we want to be strong going into that process.
Any other comments or questions on this agenda item? Okay. Any questions from my colleagues up here? No? All right, then. Let me just get organized for the next one that we're going to be doing. Okay, so for this third item, which is on our permit review process, I'm going to actually ask to do a little switch of people up on the dais here. So if Tom McHenry and Bill McGavern could come join me up here, that would be great. And I think Meredith and Josh are going to sit down in the audience. Wonderful. And while they are getting themselves situated, I just introduce Bill McGavern here and Tom McHenry are both co-chairs for our external advisory group, and they have served in the capacity of special advisors on this project, and so I wanted them up here as the experts along with me. Tom is an attorney with the law firm Gibson, Dunn & Crutcher, and Bill McGavern is now currently with the Coalition for Clean Air, has a long career of environmental advocacy. Both what Bill and Tom have in common is a somewhat mysterious yet gratifying interest in Department of Toxic Substances Control, that they have been willing in their very busy schedules to take out time on a volunteer basis to work with us, always with the intention of making us a better department, of helping us meet our mission and protecting Californians. And for that, I am tremendously, tremendously grateful. So I wanted to set the context for this next agenda item because it came about very much because of some actions that I took and some observations I made very early on in my tenure here as director. So I've been director since May of 2011. And when I came on board, I found a department that was what I would call structural disarray. We had all sorts of problems with our budget. We were upside down in our budget. We had problems with our staffing. Our allocation of resources was out of whack, and we didn't have people in the right places organized in a way to meet our mission. At the same time, we had a very important program in crisis, our Safer Consumer Product Program. So there was a lot of turmoil. And as I started to wade my way through all of that, piece by piece, we came away with a phrase that we, and all the staff listening to this will know this in their sleep, this idea of fixing the foundation, that we couldn't leap to the next element and meet our mission with confidence until we stepped back from the brink and took a look at our very foundational elements, took a look at the actual makings, underpinnings of our programs. I like to say that for success, one needs willingness and capacity. It turns out that this department has a tremendous amount of both, a tremendous amount of willingness to do the job and do it right, and a phenomenal technical capacity and professionalism that just needed to be tapped into. And that's what we've been doing the last 2.5 years. And the way we think about this journey is we think about it in phases. Phase one we're done with. Phase one was what I call stopping the free fall, where we fixed our budget, we fixed our system to collect money owed to us in cleanup projects, we fixed the Safer Consumer Products program, we fixed our allocations. We're done with phase one. Now we're ready for phase two. Phase two is looking at what I call process and systems, taking a look at each element of our work, whether it's a computer program that tracks the movement of hazardous waste, or a system involved with cleanup to make sure that we aren't getting spun in circles and that cleanup is going in a quick and efficient manner. Every program, whether you're in legal or admin or communications, is looking at its processes and systems and identifying needs for improvement. And we're doing that with phenomenal honesty and transparency. It's all on the web. Our Fixing the Foundation initiative is up online with our targets, with our progress for everyone to watch and to hold us accountable and to give us input. So what you're about to hear is in that larger context. When I met with the external advisory group and I said, come to this meeting and tell me about hazardous waste management. Tell me what you think needs fixing. Let's step way back and take a look at this system of moving hazardous waste, of managing hazardous waste in our state. What should we be paying attention to? And what came out loud and clear was actually a very small program in terms of numbers of people, but a very critical one in terms of the work we do, and that is our permitting program. Our permitting program, when you look at the large number of people in our department, is very small, but that's deceiving because permitting staff link to every other piece of this organization. They are not in isolation. They cannot do their work in isolation. They depend on the legal department. They depend on the CEQA unit. They depend on public participation. They depend on cleanup. They depend on admin. So while they are a hub of a wheel, they do not act alone. And this very important program had been shuttled along from place to place within our department for the last 7 to 10 years. And it was time to focus our attention there. That came from people from Kettleman, that came from Exide, that came from communities who said, we have facilities in our backyard and we are worried that you are not minding the store. And we had businesses saying, we have value to this state and we are worried that you are not minding the store. We want a level playing field. We want to know what the rules are. We want consistency. We want timeliness. Fair enough, that's what I say, fair enough. That's what we need to deliver. And I understood that I didn't have all the answers myself. I certainly didn't. Nor was I confident that we alone could take the hard enough look at ourselves and get to the answers we needed. So even though we had our Fixing the Foundation initiative, I wanted to bring in an outside set of eyes to take a look. And so we embarked on a search. What kind of entity would be able to do that evaluation and give us a report? And how do we make sure that me, am as far away from them as possible so that I get the real deal? We get the real information. And we came up with CPSHR. They are an entity that has been doing government reform, government improvement for years. And we selected them as our lead. And we said, but they don't really know permitting very well, and they don't know DTSC very well. So what we need are 2 expert set of outside eyes to help advise and guide them. And with that, it was very easy to select Tom and Bill. And so as we embark and listen, as I listen, because honestly, this is the first time I will be hearing all of these presentations from staff and from our outside advisors, I want to share with you my commitment to listen with an open mind and to take these recommendations seriously and to hold ourselves accountable to make the change that's needed. So with that, I'd like to, before we start, ask my two key advisors to weigh in a little bit and give a bit of their perspective. So Tom, why don't you start us off?
Thank you, Deb. Am I on? Yeah. Thank you, Debbie. I think you've really put your finger on the initial impetus of this process. I just want to stress a couple of factors, and then Bill will, I think, mention some of his own. I was asked to participate in this process in part because, along with Bill, I serve on the external advisory group for DTSC and have done that through 2 directors and 1 interim director, and have been involved in permitting at a number of sites, and then have also worked on some regulatory review issues and some fee issues for the DTSC over the years. My perspective has been more on the industry side than it has been on the community side, although we do represent some community groups over the years on a pro bono basis, and that was hopefully balanced by Bill. I just want to make a couple of quick points about the process, and later on, if there are certainly questions, we may get some about it. One is that this was an independent review process. I read the initial Toxic Clearinghouse report when it came out and thought that there were perhaps some good issues that were raised, but there was also some comments that were off base. And having worked with a number of the DTSC folks over the year, I'd emphasize Debbie's earlier point about willingness, the great willingness, as well as the high levels of expertise within the agency, the commitment to trying to do things right. That we wanted to make sure there was an independent process from the start. So the way that the development of the report took place was that Bill and I served in a kind of advisory capacity to identify issues that we thought were important, to provide some background on the permitting process and on DTSC generally, but to let the consultants do their work. We and the department did not direct the consultants in a particular direction. We didn't presuppose what the answers would be, and we were very open to what they were going to develop. I should also mention, if I'm not stealing some of Bill's thunder, that Bill and I had served on something called the Performance Review Panel 2 directors ago, which was an effort to look at various aspects of the DTSC program. And one of the aspects that we looked at, I believe it was 2010, Bill, I think is when we did it, so I guess it was 3 years ago, was the permitting program. And we had received a briefing on that permitting program, actually, I think here in this very room. And there were some improvements to the permitting program that were made at that time, which were directed very much at what we thought of as a key parameter, which was simply the time it took to get a permit issued. And I was under the impression, I think Bill may have been also, that we had fixed a lot of the issues associated with permitting. But I think what we learned and what you'll hear about in the presentations today is that while there may still have been plenty of willingness, there was a lack of capacity in terms of the resources, as well as issues associated with just simply the coordination with the various groups that was still delaying the processing of permits. And I think what we were also learning, if I'm not also stealing thunder from people, was that there are a lot of smaller, less controversial permits which move along fairly quickly. There are some larger ones involving facilities where there's a lot of community interest which have been much, much slower. Finally, what we encouraged was that the report be fashioned in a way that the department could follow up on the recommendations, which is really one of the reasons we're meeting today to discuss this. And I commend Debbie and her senior staff in taking this on, and I think we also welcome comments from the audience today about the report. I will tell you, if I'm not going out too far on a limb, that since the report was issued in late September, if I have it right, something like that, I've talked to a number of people who played a role in being interviewed for the report or asked for comments. And I have, aside from the fact that there were some comments about how people weren't fully quoted, so their comments could have been taken a little bit out of context, I've not anybody tell me that we've missed any, that the report missed any big issues. We may hear that today, and if we do, I think we're very eager to hear that, but that the report was generally on track, focused on the right issues, and made a set of recommendations. So one of the things I think I'm very much looking forward to is how we move forward. I know that Debbie and her senior staff feel it very important that we move this ahead, and if you read the way the report's been written, you can see that there are some guidelines about how we do that. So I'll stop right there. I'll
Thank you.
Answer any other questions if you have any.
Thank you, Tom. Bill?
Yeah, I agree with Tom's comments, and will just tell you a little bit about my perspective. First of all, I think it's very important for everybody to understand how independently this process was run. Thanks, Stu. Didn't realize I had to get that close to it. This is not a report that it comes from the department. It was commissioned by the department, but then really was turned over entirely to CPS and with Tom and I advising. And so I just, I can verify that as the process went on, Debbie stayed, more than arm's length away from it, really didn't even know what we were doing. And the DTSC staff were not in any way dictating or controlling the results. So, whether you like it or not, it's not something that actually comes from the government. It's an independent review. My role during the process was to try to make sure that the public interest community had input, that we had people both from groups that work at the statewide level and are concerned with DTSC policy, and also community groups who have been involved in permitting decisions at particular sites, who were given the opportunity to have extensive input on the report, and they certainly were asked, and many availed themselves of the opportunity. And then also, I tried to bring to bear my experience, my 13 years or so of working on issues concerning this department from an environmental perspective, and tried to give guidance to the consultants when issues came up that I had some familiarity with. So that means that when the topics had to do with good management of government agencies, that's something that CPS has a lot of experience with, and I frankly don't. I've never worked for the government, so I mostly deferred to them on those issues. But when it came to issues of environmental and public health policy that I had experience with, then I think they and Tom would tell you I wasn't afraid to speak up and give my perspective. I think that the department is responding already to the report, looking at their draft response, and we'll talk about this more, but I think there's some areas where I think the response is stronger than it is in others, but that's something that we all can talk about. I have to say that when we first started getting the results of the research done by CPS, my reaction was, wow, this situation is worse than I thought it was. And it's partly because, as Tom said, we had been told by the staff when we were on the performance review panel that there have been a lot of improvements made, and yet only 3 years later, we were hearing a lot of indications that there really was disarray, that there wasn't internal agreement on what the practices should be, or even what the fundamental objectives should be. And I'm telling you, those were the results of the research done. I will also tell you that it's very difficult to tell from the outside what's going on inside a governmental agency. So, I won't claim that I have all that insight. It seemed to me that CPS came at this without any axe to grind, and with a kind of methodical approach, did a lot of research, gathered a lot of information, and then proceeded on the basis of that. So I'm sure there'll be plenty of disagreement on the findings, but just want to give a little insight into how the process looked from our side. Thanks.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Tom. That's great. You can see, I hope you come away with an understanding of the structure of this, how we went into it, who the players are, and now to take us a little bit more into how the report was put together and how the investigation was done. I would like to ask Richard Mallory to come up from CPSHR to give us a presentation from his perspective. Thank you, Richard.
Would you like me to use the microphone here? Okay. Yeah, I'm pleased to be here, and pleased to be here and see everybody today, and tell you a little bit about the report and sort of what we did and how we did it. As you indicated, Director Raphael, the report was done under federal government audit standards, a primary means of ensuring independence of recommendations and results. The federal government auditing standards require an auditor such as myself to be number one objective. So we basically have to start out and say, you know, what is it you're trying to learn here? And you gave us a real clear outline of what you wanted us to do. Look at timeliness, look at standard process, and some other things. And then we have to establish a methodology. In other words, so as not to distort a result, you're basically saying, okay, we have a standard way that we're going to obtain this. Oh, okay. All right. Okay. And so that we have a methodology as a standard way to obtain the data. So, you know, sometimes they say, you know, there's the real facts, the true facts, my facts, and your facts. And what we try to do is to avoid that. We basically say, what facts are we going to obtain? How are we going to obtain them? And then do that, and then draw the conclusions from that. So there's no possibility to go back and say, well, we should have had that body of information because it would have made our case better. We can't do that because we're locked in on a methodology. And then we establish criteria. We say, how are we going to make decisions about what we find? And then we gather evidence, and then we create a record of all the things that we've obtained. So in that way, you have an absolutely independent audit process. So what we did in the particular permit process review was we started out with a review really of the legalities of the issue. And what we did was we had your staff provide us with a white paper on the legal requirements. What are you supposed to do? And we circulated that, of course, also to our advisory committee, Tom and Bill, and said, is this all we should be looking at? And they had a few other suggestions, and we tried to get that. And later we used that with stakeholders as well to say, you know, are these the key legal requirements that we should be looking at? So in other words, we knew what the law says that the program is supposed to do. And then from that, we went on and we talked to all employees. We had a meeting with all employees, and we kind of gave them a briefing of what we were going to do and asked for their significant issues as well. We then realized, of course, that your primary data record is in VirusStore. So, you know, it's one thing to say, okay, let's just go ahead and use that data record, but it's another thing to say, well, is the data record accurate and complete in the first place? So we said, okay, well, we better go out and do an audit of the data record just to make sure that it's accurate and complete. So in doing that, we went through and identified 9 key benchmark measures that were included in that record. And we reviewed permit actions in each field office to basically verify that the data in the record was accurate and complete. And we searched out, went to the administrative record, which is the paper copy. We pulled those out of the library. We paged through every record to match, basically, the data record with the paper record. And we were able to, in roughly 85% of all instances, do that match. So we could verify that that was correct. In the 15% that were missing, they were basically, there was no pattern of distortion. It was just records were gone. They weren't there. So in some cases, it might have been a call-in letter or something like that. It just, excuse me, simply wasn't in the data record, but we could see from the processing that one had been received. It just wasn't there. So some of the records, just for whatever reason, were not present, and that led, of course, to one of our recommendations that the whole system of obtaining and tracking the data be better handled in the future. So, hopefully you'd have 100% in the future, but we concluded that 85% was reliable and that we could then use that data record for our in-depth analysis. So we did an in-depth review of the data record. We did a series of stakeholder meetings at which we posed questions about the program, and particularly to say, what do you think the program should do, or where do you think the program is deficient, and we matched those. So, in other words, you can have a lot of people who are looking at a program area and saying it's bad or it's very good, but when you can match points of view either from an interest group as a whole or for your whole universe, then the acceptability of that as a proof basically increases. So that's what we try to do, is go through the record, find out, and obviously there's different what we call stakeholder groups here. There's those people who represent what we call the industry, the folks that are they're trying to, generally for profit, to relieve the public of an obligation. And then we have the folks that are, generally speaking, saying, well, is this environmentally appropriate, and is it protecting communities? So we have two different stakeholder groups, and you know what? In some cases, they agreed. So that's the kind of things that we look for. That we know those are reliable findings. So from all those sources, we were able to come up with our recommendations, and also, to some extent, we use professional opinion because, we are management and government management experts. So in the case, for example, of recommendations about the adequate level of supervision, that would be something that would be based on professional opinion. So there's a variety of sources, but primarily we're not trying to be an author of new things. We're basically saying, look at what the intent of this program is and look at how it's doing, and then find the deficiencies based on, the premise of how it was structured, what it's supposed to do, and so on. So I don't want to take a long time, but I did want to take enough time to sort of let everybody know how we did this study. A few things I think that are real important, that are interesting and important. The permitting program, I think, is working it's public credit. Let me put it that way. That there's a lot of things that are right about it. So I know that some of the employees felt that we were sort of hard on them, and to an extent you have to be, because we're sort of comparing where you are against what's supposed to be or perfect, in terms of the way the program was structured. But there's a lot of hardworking employees in the program who've spent years under difficult circumstances trying to do the right thing. So those people deserve a tremendous amount of credit. We never saw any evidence anywhere that anybody was disregarding the law. I think everybody was trying to hold the law as their highest standard. And one thing that I sort of learned that I was a novice about, but maybe the public doesn't know well enough is that permitting operates, or is sort of the the centerpiece, the center link in the chain of maintaining a closed loop of, toxic waste disposal and treatment. And I don't think perhaps and we're impressed by that what you call the tiered permitting system, ensures that, no matter where toxic waste would go in the state, that, it would get caught up in the system and tracked into a logged means of disposal and treatment. So, it's not turning up missing, is what. and I don't know that the public knows that kind of a closed loop exists, but I was impressed by that finding. So some of the recommendations I'll just touch on. The first one was that the audit, the data, the EnviroStore data, be affirmatively logged and tracked. So, it would increase the accuracy of the EnviroStore record in the future. And I think that's real important that, at present, we found it was 85% accurate, but I think, that's why organizations have supervisors, is so that you have a second level of review of those sorts of things. And, where you have important data records like that, we had recommended that a supervisor sign off on, yes, the call-in letter was sent. Yes, the part application A and B was received, and yes, here's what the date is. And so, those things I think will be, long-term, there'll be huge improvements in the system that was already good, but we want to make it excellent. And another finding, obviously, I think everybody kind of knew it going in, but permitting actions were not timely. And we were able to concur and confirm that staffing was one key reason. When we went back and looked at the record of permitting historically, we could see that back to the 1990s up to about 2002, it was sort of like figuring out what the process was and getting it in a reasonably good shape, and it took a long time. Permitting actions were taking over 4 years. They were really just sort of inventing the process. Between 2003 and 2007, the period that actually, Tom, you were talking about, there was a significant reduction in the permitting time, and that was due both to a lot of attention that was given by management, as well as, frankly, a lot of staff that was committed to that function. Since 2007, the state financial crisis hit, and as you well know, that there was a dramatic reduction in staffing, which, combined with some other things, has turned the tables the other way. So permitting is now sort of fighting upriver, trying to maintain a reasonable permitting time, and one of the things we recommended was that they get some additional staffing. We also recommended, as you know, that they implement standard process, which they did have, but I don't know if the public knows. When they say that it takes 3 years to get a permitting action or 4 years to get a permitting action, this is the application here. It's like they have to go through every page of this thing and verify something on every page. It's huge, and I know. The staff was saying, well, yes, we have a standard process, kind of a summary, almost like an index in the beginning of what they call the Part B. But, what we did in the report was we tried to put together a standard process flow chart that's real easy to follow. And, I think over time, if the able hands that know the program modify that process flow chart and add a couple little helpful tutorials, if you want to call them that, checklists and that, the process should be a lot simpler. So, when you hire new staff, they'll be able to do it a lot quicker. We talked about some implementing some process management, project management procedures, including having a charter and a project plan. I think the department's real open to that, and I think that'll be very helpful. As is true with a lot of audits of this type, you know, we don't necessarily invent this stuff. We actually found some field staff that were doing project plans, and they were saying, why doesn't everybody use them? And we said, yeah, you're right, why doesn't everybody use them? So, you know, we steal the best ideas whenever we can, wherever we see them. And we identified a series of real tough stuff, and you know that I sort of apologize. We can identify it, but we can't give you the answers for. And you know what that is. You know, a lot of things like getting standard definitions of violations and when those things pose significant and immediate risk to the public. I know that I could tell stories, but I won't. But you know, we found a lot of instances of where things were reported. The department's trying very hard to be transparent and report things to the public. But you know, when we'd ask questions about why is this significant for the public to know, in some cases the answer was, I don't know why it's important for the public to know. And you know, when you say that the staff that handles this information is very knowledgeable about it, and you're passing that through to the public and saying, well, there's a lot of information here on this permit, and so suppose I'm going to be living next to this facility where the permit is going to be. I'm going, well, this stuff all looks very worrisome. You know, should I be concerned or not? And if nobody can tell me, well, you should or shouldn't be, then it's kind of like, well, then I am. So, you know, it's probably creating a lot of angst about just the level of things that are being reported. Part of that is due to the legislation, the law, basically. The law says that, for example, and I will give an example if we got a minute. Do we have a minute? Okay. Well, I know with and this one was controversial with the Kettleman City landfill. Many people were saying, are they a serial violator? And, you know, is because they're, you know, presumed to have had violations, are these things that are of immediate public concern? Well, you know, if it's the fact that, you know, they didn't have an administrative system that adequately reported things, but there was no immediate or significant risk, that under law is still a Category 1 violation. So to the public, I mean, yeah, if somebody had a whole bunch of those things, you'd say, well, they're, you know, not being honest, and that's a major concern. But if they just had not implemented an administrative action they should have, it isn't necessarily the magnitude that, you know, you should close the facility down tomorrow. So, you know, the level of magnitude of what has occurred needs to be better explained to the public so that they can say, yes, it is, or no, it isn't, you know. And this is the tough stuff of government, obviously, and the stuff that, you know, you wrestle with, but, and a risk standard, you know, having some kind of a publicly accepted risk standard. I know that with our advisory committee, that was one of the last things that we talked about is, you know, could there be one? If there was, what it should look like. We had some interesting discussions, but we never actually got to agree to that. And we said, well, let's leave that up to the director and her wisdom. And so we've returned that issue to you. But we did have a lot of, I think, good discussion. We have got some sources, and you know, it's one that needs to be answered. I mean, the nature of democracy is that we have to have, you know, consensus decisions about things that are the best judgment of the group of the people that you can get together and gather together and then go forward with them in good faith. So, you know, somehow the department has to close those loops, and even if everybody's not happy, just to be able to say it was a consensus decision, everybody was heard, and it's something that we can live with in the future. So the last thing that I'll touch on was metrics. You know, how could you get metrics of success of the permitting program? And we got quite a few. You know, I don't know that they're quite the magnitude that everybody hoped they would be, but, you know, certainly being able to certify timely actions, I think, are good. And being able to, you know, through having standard definitions of what each action requires, being able to substantially verify that all your steps were complete is a value add. So, So I think that's a good one. Minimizing administrative exemptions, I think, is good. I don't think anybody, staff, public, anybody is comfortable with having permittees that are long extended beyond the expiration of the original permit. So, you know, I mean, there's some ways perhaps to do that. I don't know that all of them are in the report, but, you know, getting out, you know, your notices earlier, requiring or asking for your Part A, Part B sooner, you know, would probably help, and all the process changes will help. In increasing, and you know, one thing that I thought, that I sort of dug out as we were going through, but one thing I think that's perhaps an unheralded part of the permitting program is that you know, 1.82 billion pounds of toxic waste are generated in California per year. 1.82 billion pounds. And if you do the math, that's like 48 pounds per resident per year. So, you know, when you're saying that, you know, then you're saying, well, you know, in a way, we're sort of all part of the process because, you know, I mean, we sit under mercury lights to evaluate how to make the environment better, and like the mercury lights got to go somewhere at the end of their lifespan. So, you know, it's not like it's just some other people that are doing this stuff. It's like all of us are doing this stuff, and you know, so in a way, that's why I say we owe an enormous gratitude to your staff and to permitting for that, because it's safely disposed of, and I was impressed also, you know, 62% of it is treated to non-waste standards, and with the rest being in landfills. So, you know, there's a real positive, productive job being done there, and I think the department needs to, you know, include that in their metrics. I know your long-term goal is to, you know, reduce the total toxic flow or eliminate it maybe someday, but in the meantime, thank goodness it's all in that closed-loop system and being safely disposed. So last measure that we couldn't get, and I know we talked about it on our advisory group, was just if there's some way to you know, get a comprehensive toxic burden measure implemented for communities. You know, it would be a wonderful thing if you could say, well, there's a toxic disposal site here, but you know, we can also see that the comprehensive toxics burden is the same or less, you know, in this region or area. So, you know, that's a longer term one, but it certainly would be a wonderful one if it could be achieved. So in any case, I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody has. I was really pleased to be able to be of help to you in developing some recommendations, and I'm hopeful that, you know, a lot of good is going to come out of it.
Richard, thank you so much, and thank you for that. It was very enjoyable for me to hear your reflections. This is the first time I've heard you just reflect on the past few months, and I found it very interesting to what somebody who isn't immersed in it on a daily basis takes away as your aha moments. And it's true, it's all of us generating. We are all generators, and we are all part of that. And what you discovered that surprised you and gave you concern gives me concern too. And I greatly appreciate the time that you put in, the professionalism, and the heart that you brought to this as well. Thank you. And so what I'll ask is that we'll move forward, and then at the end, I may ask you to come back and answer some other questions. Thank you, Richard. So now I would like to introduce Brian Johnson, who is the Deputy of the Hazardous Waste Management Program, who will then sort of get to this next part of the agenda, which is, so now what? We've heard from CPS HR, we've heard from stakeholders. What are we going to do now? Brian.
Thank you, Director. Good morning. My first job here is to introduce the presenters that you will hear next. It's a team of 3 presenters from our Office of Permitting. First, you'll hear from Rizgar Ghazi. He is the chief of our Office of Permitting. He is a licensed mechanical engineer. He's been with the department over 24 years, and just recently, earlier this year, had been appointed as chief of the Office of Permitting. So Rizgar brings a fresh set of eyes, as well as an an appreciative history of performance in moving projects and initiatives forward, so we're pleased to welcome Rizgar. Secondly, we will hear from Peter Bailey. He's a registered senior engineering geologist. He's been here with us 14 years. He's been in permitting for 7 years. He's our team leader on the critical landfill unit, and he's the leader of that unit. Lastly, we will hear from Wayne Lorenzen. Wayne here has been with the department about 7 years, about half that in the landfills unit, and has been a part of some of the key permit decisions that have been made, and brings a tremendous amount of experience to the table. Wayne is a registered chemical engineer, so you get a sense of the different disciplines just within permitting that you'll be hearing from this morning. Thank you. Rizgar?
And I just want to let all of us know that we are now getting translated. There's being translation going on in the room, so do not speak too fast.
Thank you, Brian. Tom and Bill, it's a pleasure to finally meet you. Thank you, Director Rafael, for affording us the opportunity to present to you the department's findings. Yep. Hello? Hello? Oh. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Director Rafael, for affording us the opportunity to present to you the department's response to the CPS review findings and recommendations. And thank you to you all for taking the time from your day to attend this meeting today. The Office of Permitting welcomes the inquiry and dialogue that the CPS review has created. We recognize the importance of having an outside entity provide a meaningful analysis of our program. While some of the findings were difficult to receive, we sincerely appreciate the time and effort that has been and will continue to be dedicated to this effort. And we understand that these recommendations were made in the spirit of assisting the Office of Permitting, the department, in making a sound decision. I would like to underline one key point, though. The permitting staff, without any doubt, take their mission seriously. That is to protect the human health and the environment. The permits are only issued when an applicant can demonstrate they can operate the facility safely. We will recognize the importance of statewide hazardous waste capacity, community and equity, and other factors that may inform a permit decision. Ultimately, no factors supersedes our mission, that is to protect the human health and environment when considering a permit decision. The CPS review highlights the importance of the CPS review highlights that it takes DTSC a substantial amount of time to process a permit. While the act of permitting a facility may seem at first glance simple and straightforward, the review process is complex and labor intensive. It requires staff to be familiar with hundreds of pages of regulations and statutes regarding the management of hazardous waste. The permit review process has to have specific interpretation of these regulations and statutes as they relate to each individual facility's specific processes and operations. While we issue a permit to a facility, it's really the hazardous waste management units that gets a permit. It's not uncommon for facilities to have over 30 units or more that perform specific hazardous waste operations. Each of these units require a comprehensive and thorough review. Now, these units are reviewed for engineering design, waste managed, capacity, closure plan, cost of closure, structural and seismic integrity, performance standards, and operational safety and risk aspects. Oftentimes, each unit requires an input from chemical engineers, civil engineers, mechanical engineers, geologists, hydrogeologists, chemists, scientists, environmental planners, and lastly but not the least, our attorneys. The review of a permit application is neither ministerial nor perfunctory. The application is comprised of a large, comprehensive technical document. Rich showed a document We have facilities with over 35 volumes of reports that we receive. So it's not just one document that we look at and we just rubber stamp it to issue the permit. It is a task to be taken. That said, the Office of Permitting is committed to finding efficiencies, and we know there is plenty of room for improvement. We can all improve. We have put together a comprehensive plan that addresses the area for improvement identified by the CPS review and our Fix the Foundation initiative. Pierre Bailey and Wayne Lorenzen will discuss the details of our plans. As you know, our efforts to address the foundational issues began before the CPS was commissioned to conduct its review. Our Fix the Foundation efforts have already yielded a meaningful change. Earlier this year, we brought the program into a traditional management structure and aligned it with the hazardous waste management program, including enforcement. This change alone produces significant benefit. For example, the Office of Permitting, along with the enforcement group, shut down a facility in Rancho Cordova and worked hand in hand with the enforcement group to bring the facility back into compliance. Only then we allowed the facility to come back into operations again, to start up again. Clearly, there is more work to be done. Our Fix the Foundation initiative and the recommendation of the CPS review are closely aligned. We look forward to continuing the improvements identified in both initiatives. I'm confident that our program is headed in the right direction. I'm proud to lead the small but dedicated group of men and women that take their jobs seriously and are committed to protecting Californians. Now, Pierre Bailey, our team lead, will come up here and discuss the details of our review, of the CPS review, inclusive of our findings and recommendations. Thank you.
Thanks, Rizgar. Director Rafael. Permitting staff are deeply committed to their work, and needless to say, the content of the CPS review stimulated a fair amount of creative permitting thought. The response we prepared is combined effort from all of DTSC's permitting staff as well as many other DTSC program staff. Focused internal workshops, meetings, and discussions were key communication tools to help compile our collective response. The end result is our preliminary draft response to CPS permitting review process and analysis review, which is now posted on DTSC's homepage under Fixing the Foundation. And there are copies available at the back of the room. We are confident that implementing the action items identified in our response will assure improved timeliness and efficiencies of DTSC's permitting process. So what is permitting doing now? Because of the number of overlapping issues identified in the CPS review and those that in the Fixing the Foundation that Debbie mentioned earlier, it was evident that we needed to be clear of our direction in order that both efforts are addressed. To do this, we needed to find quantifiable tasks first to complete so that we could monitor our progress. And also, we needed to clearly define the process so that we could address all the issues in both CPS and Fixing the Foundation. So for my presentation, I'll be talking about define the task. So later, Wayne will talk about define those processes, which includes more detail of those tasks. So to define our tasks, we folded both the CPS review and Fixing the Foundation actions into our response. The CPS review contained a number of recommendations, which Rich just went over, and Fixing the Foundation initiatives, a number of Fixing the Foundation initiatives to complete related to permitting and enforcement. Our response is the common ground. So our response is the common ground for both reports, that we need to look at both and come up with a number of tasks. And we came up with 51 tasks. So specifically, these tasks will address the recommendations in the CPS report and in the Fixing the Foundation it'll ensure a comprehensive enhancement of our permitting process and helping us continue to make solid permit decisions. So, as I mentioned earlier, we identified 51 tasks from the CPS review and fixing the foundation. About a third of those tasks have been completed already, and Wayne's going to go into a little bit more detail after this. There are 35 tasks are in progress, and most of these are already in the list of fixing the foundation that are in a 3, 6, or 12-month completion schedule. A few of these tasks may require more time and may be included in a next iteration of fixing the foundation. So a key thing is that some tasks will require collective effort from DTSC subject experts and programs to evaluate health risk for permitting, to prepare policies for denials and revocations, and guidance for issuance of permits. So the scope of some of these tasks will take some time. Being a collective effort, permitting will need your support to reach out to other DTSC programs for assistance in some of these tasks. So let's see, I'm missing a page. Let me go back here. I had a page here that showed where there's 3 key documents regarding the discussion that are available on DTSC's homepage. And I'll just say that if you go to DTSC's homepage, there's the center banner, DTSC Fixing the Foundation. You'll find the 3 documents related to this discussion. The first one is DTSC's Fixing the Foundation, which I just mentioned. And this, as you mentioned earlier, Debbie, this lists those action items and associated progress indicators. Also, there are links for each of these indicators to specific work plans. So also, number 2 is the CPS review, which Rich just talked about. And thirdly is our preliminary draft response to the review. So I just wanted to let you know where all these documents are. So now I'd like to introduce Wayne Lorenzen from the Office of Permitting Landfills team to talk about defining the process and briefly describe details in the tasks completed and those that are in progress. Thank you. Wayne.
Thank you, Peter. Director Raphael. My name is Wayne Lorenzen, and I am a proud member of the Office of Permitting. I work among staff who come to work every day to protect public health and the environment. We make sound decisions on permits by understanding the operations of the facilities we regulate and the engineering principles and science needed to comprehend the implications of the decisions that we make. All of us take our mission seriously and provide permit conditions that ensure our draft permits are legally defensible and protective of public health and the environment. And we are always willing to improve. That is why we are pleased to share with you the plans we are working on in response to findings in the CPS review and fixing the foundation. As Peter mentioned, we have taken the recommendations and initiatives from these reviews and divided them up into tasks that we believe will reinforce our foundation. Those tasks will result in improvements to both our processes and our management practices. I will talk first about the tasks we have completed and then the tasks that are in progress. So as this slide shows, we have already implemented tasks that improve our process. We have expanded our data storage and tracking system, EnviroStore, to improve the efficiency of posting administrative records to our public website. We have coordinated with our enforcement staff to review all draft permits to ensure enforceability and consideration of enforcement actions in our permits. We've provided CEQA training to staff, and we continue to require population of permitting data into our EnviroStore system at the time that DTSC initiates renewal notifications to the facilities that we regulate. This permitting data includes projected scheduled timelines. And again, these are tasks that we have already completed. Consistent with our regulations, we require submittal of complete applications 180 days prior to the expiration of a permit before allowing a facility to keep operating. And lastly, we've provided financial assurance training to staff to assure accuracy in the financial mechanisms that facilities are required to have. Similarly, we have already implemented tasks that have resulted in changes to our management practices. As this slide shows, we continue to hold meetings between our branch chief and supervisors and seniors. These meetings ensure review of progress assignments and identification of issues that may result in delay to projects. We've realigned our supervisory structure to a more traditional work group unit structure. This ensures supervisors and senior staff will fulfill appropriate management and leadership roles, including management of unit operations, staff assignments, and performance evaluations. Our branch chief also is participating in US EPA Region 9 calls to disseminate current RCRA permit issues to staff. But we are not finished, and we have more work to do to improve our process. For example, one of the recommendations made in the CPS review is to develop instructional and guidance materials to support the technical review process. This recommendation is consistent with a Fixing the Foundation initiative to identify training needs and provide guidance document training to permitting staff. Although our technical review for permit decisions is decisively based on well-defined standards listed in our regulations, we feel that these guidance documents have strong potential not to replace our regulations, but to provide a concise map to them, especially for new permit writers. So, we are going to provide guidance documents and training in the next 12 months on facility standards, closure plans, tank assessments, and landfill design. We will also develop guidance documents on an overview of the permitting process, permit writing, project management, CEQA, and environmental justice and public participation. Each of these guidance documents represents tasks that we are excited to implement to strengthen the foundation we already have and improve our process even further. We are also excited to implement, among others listed here, developing policy on the recommended lengths for permit actions and policy on monitoring compliance for facilities with expired permits. Developing these policies will provide uniform expectations and facilitate a better understanding for the public. We use software to prepare cost estimates for closure and post-closure care requirements at permitted facilities. We are eager to enhance our software training for project managers to increase the number of staff who can provide cost estimates for our projects. We will also evaluate and research violation details to determine the most effective approach for evaluating risk and categorizing violations. We will develop a matrix of performance measures that we can use to track our success and identify any additional improvements. We are developing standard operating procedures for staff and management roles. We are preparing guidance manuals, policy, and model permits. And we are creating a central electronic library so that our staff have easy access to these. All of these tasks we have identified will improve our process and help alleviate the length of time it takes to issue a hazardous waste facility permit. But we are not finished with changes to management practices either. We will be conducting quarterly audits of EnviroStore data to improve data quality, and will continue annual performance appraisals for staff and management. We are also working with our Office of Communication and Office of Planning and Environmental Analysis to establish a clear understanding of staff involvement for permitting projects. And we will be evaluating our needs for additional resources. The last task we are working on is to finalize this list of tasks that we have presented today, make them available to the public, and periodically review with permitting staff. This list of tasks is now itemized in our preliminary draft response to the CPS review, which Peter showed in an earlier slide, and it can be found on our homepage under DTSC's Fixing the Foundation. So as we continue to make solid decisions on permits, as we continue to protect public health and the environment, we are confident that these reviews have given us insight into areas that we can bolster to improve our process even further, to make it even more efficient, and we are excited to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. And I'd like to thank Rich and Tom and Bill as well for the energy and the time that has gotten us to this point. Indeed, these are seminal times for us at DTSC, and not just because of this CPS review, but because of a more fundamental commitment from Debbie and all of the staff here to this willingness to identify and engage in the very foundations of the work that we do to ensure that the service we provide to the state meets your expectations and our own high expectations. We are checking in anew in a very methodical, purposeful way into these foundations of our work. The review itself is emblematic of this overall push in DTSC. And it is a very public process. It's a transparent process, and for us, indeed, it can be a painful process as warts are revealed, as process improvement opportunities are identified, and that is what brings us here today. So it all boils down, though, to this the spot we're in now, the place we are is to take those basics, refine them to the place that we want them to be, and to present that back to the communities. As many of you know, the process of permitting decisions and permit denials for hazardous waste facilities are really a cornerstone to DTSC's work and the accomplishment of the mission that we've heard many times from folks today. Ultimately, our responsibility is to ensure, without a doubt, that our permit decisions are protective of public health and the environment, and that the decision is enforceable and legally defensible, and that decisions are issued without unnecessary delays. And we can go into that later if you'd like. So basically, our goal is to issue good permits quickly. And as Rizgar mentioned, the quality of our permits is of paramount importance. We will not compromise that. That is the most important thing that we do, and we recognize that. And we want to do it without unnecessary delays. And we know where we are now with the delays that have occurred over the years in the system, and we are addressing that. But it's absolutely important that you understand, that our staff understands that commitment to a quality work product, whether it's a denial of a permit or a permit approval. So I've spent a lot of hours looking at this report, reading this report, taking it all in, talking to staff from throughout the department, talking to stakeholders from outside the department, speaking with our own executive staff. We take this very, very seriously. It confirms our understanding that we have things that we can do to improve our process, particularly in the areas of consistency, transparency, timing, predictability. We recognize that. But what I have also learned from looking at this report and spending so much time with it is that our system fundamentally is not so compromised that we cannot continue to do the job that we are doing now and improve it. We can continue to make permitting decisions, and we will continue to make these decisions, and that they will be sound decisions, and that we will improve them, and that is our commitment. So this review, it presents, for those of you who have looked at it, you know, even though it was not derived by a government agency, we are known for document bulk. When Rich held up the application, that didn't impress me. My first entree into the hazardous waste industry about 25 years ago, the permit for the household hazardous waste facility that I managed for the city of Santa Monica was 14 pounds. 14 pounds of conditions and words that were specific to that facility and that activity. So to give you a sense of the depth of the dive that our staff go into, whether they be engineers of one shade or another, whether they be toxicologists, enforcement folks, attorneys, CEQA experts, geologists, all of those folks are a part of, and I apologize, I'll channel Hillary here, a part of the village that is permitting. And permitting sits in the center of that village in the town plaza, but they are always and will always depend upon the expertise. And that is a piece of our improvement, is creating that integration at a much better level with all of those folks that I just mentioned, so that we don't have issues that go eddy out somewhere and become dormant, that we keep the pedal on the metal, that the timing is a concern to us, and that is a commitment. So while our staff, we have identified flaws in the report, and we recognize that, but a general consensus among both our permitting staff and those within the department is it brings value. It brings a new value to what we are trying to do in permitting and what we will do. There is direct and immediate value in implementation of the 20 recommendations, that total of 20 recommendations that CPS has provided at the end of the document. I think many of you may be familiar with that. There's value from sharing our own perspectives within permitting. What is our responsibility? What is our mission? What is our process? And having to explain that to someone, to teach someone in CPS, so that we ourselves hear ourselves saying that and have to be able to explain it to someone else. That brings tremendous value. For any of you who have been teachers, I think you can agree. There's value in hearing stakeholder perspectives, what they think of us, what they think of the process, what is clear and what is not clear. And that piece that is not clear, it is our responsibility at DTSC to make that clear. Clarity should be our job, so that there isn't confusion in the community about how we made a decision and why we made a decision. Lastly, I want to mention, I made a few notes here, the value of stepping out of our day-to-day work, which is what we have done to respond to this report, to create the fix the foundation tasks that are defining us right now. When you step out of that, your day-to-day work, and elevate yourself and look at that for a while, there's tremendous value in that, because it gives you the opportunity to ask why, who, how, when, and that's the value that the CPS report has initiated for us. So, I am responsible for so many elements of this process. Permitting sits at the center of the wheel that Debbie described, and I am responsible for that. I am also responsible for integrating with my fellow deputies who are here at the table and others throughout the department, for making it work and work well. And that's my responsibility, and I accept that, and I take it, I embrace it. I also recognize that the whole department, and particularly this team in Office of Permitting, has been organizationally challenged for a number of years. Their staffing has been reduced. They have been moved organizationally in the structure. It's been difficult for them to have a consistency and a representation, an executive representation that they need and deserve. I am that now. They are in the Hazardous Waste Management Program. That is my responsibility. They are closest to, I believe, are their most significant partner in DTSC, which is the enforcement program. They now sit side by side, and that's important. So I'm pleased that we've taken the steps that this team has presented to you. There is so much more on the plate. We know this tremendous amount of detail for those of you who are interested, because each of one of those 51 tasks that have been identified, there are people from all over the department, from all over permitting, who are taking the time, the energy out of their day job to make that work. And that's a big deal for us. We are working hard to get permits out the door and at the same time improve this process, measurably improve this process, so that we maintain the quality of the permit decisions that we make and that we deal with the delays issue, the consistency issue, the transparency issues. We will be back to this forum in 3 months, give you an update. For those who would like something more interaction, we do have the internet addresses where you can send questions and comments as well that are in the handouts and were shown on the screen. But ultimately, the proof of the pudding is in our actions, not in the words. And we ask you to hold us accountable for those actions. Please, that is your role, and our role is to respond to that, to be accountable to that. Our role is to protect public health and the environment in California. And we are pleased and honored to have this opportunity to do so and to do it better. Okay? Anything that gets us closer to that goal, such as the CPS report, our own internal motivation, our own internal DTSC-wide review, is a positive thing, and that is the energy we're taking forward from this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. So I have a couple questions. Rizgar, could you come back up to the, thanks. Thank you all. Thank you for those presentations and for your passion and commitment. So Rizgar, I have one that's kind of nitty-gritty and one that's a little broader. So we heard from Richard Mallory, that he saw an 85% accuracy rate or completion rate of what was in VirusStore, and he said, well, a simple or one step to that was to make sure that the supervisors are taking a look. Have you put that structure in place yet, or is that one of those ongoing ones?
It has been initiated, and we're looking into it. In fact, one of the recommendations, not only the supervisor is going to check into it, we're going to do an audit of the EnviroStore on a quarterly basis to make sure the supervisors are checking regularly, make sure there's.
So who will do the audit then? How will that work?
We have not set up the group. It'll be our seniors as supervisors, part of the work group that will be doing the audit. We have GPAs that we assigned right now to take the lead, but it'll be a group of us. It's not be a single person, but it'll be a group of us that will look into it.
Okay. And now I apologize if I'm putting you on the spot, but I'm going to do it anyway. Something that Tom said, and I know Bill has said to me in private as well, was this feeling like, well, how do we know that things are going to be any different this time? So some years ago, 2 directors ago, people said, oh my God, permitting needs attention. Everybody came together. There was a lot of attention put on it. Why, are you confident that, talk about that. Are you confident that things will be different? If so, where does that confidence come from? What do you need from us at the table here? And how can we make people feel confident that things will change? How can you make me feel confident?
I'm confident that I know for a fact that we have staff that's really dedicated and they want to do the right thing. That we have the engineers, the scientists in place that do the job. We're reaching out to other programs, to you, Debbie, to make sure that you support us and hold us accountable on these 51 tasks that we listed. And it's not going to get done by permitting. It's going to get done by DTSC. There's a lot of reaching out to do for us. This is one part of my job, is to reach out to you and Brian BA PEST folks to say, I need these resources if you want me to accomplish these. So these are things that we laid out, and we like the public and the director and the deputies to hold us accountable to make sure that we are fulfilling completing those tasks. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to hold up my deputy director, Brian, accountable for the commitments he made today. And that's the only way I could tell you. And the public plays a big role in it. Tom and Bill play a big role in it. They're the ones that need to come back and look at the department and say, all right, where are we now? A lot of times we produce these reports and walk away from them, but what we have put in place, it's a public, transparent document that you'll see or you'll track as how we're doing. And again, the reports are public, and we do want to hold ourselves accountable to it.
Thank you. I have one, oh, yeah, go ahead.
I was not here when the prior work that Tom and Bill referenced occurred, and so correct me if I'm misstating, but what is key to the effort right now is the depth of the dive that we are evaluating ourselves, in that we are going to the very foundation of our work and looking at all those processes, procedures, structures, all the things that aren't very sexy but make the machine run. And that is I think, absolutely critical to creating the change, implementing the change, and instituting the change. So that, I think, is a difference.
One thing I want to mention, this effort is taking a lot of resources from our permitting staff, from other programs. It is I don't want to say time-sick, but it's grinding our axe, as you said. We need to sharpen our tools so we could do our job better. It will impact some of the permitting processes we're trying to process as we go, but we think this is very critical for us to get moving faster, to process these permits faster.
And last question, and then we're going to get to public comment and questions. The report was very critical of us, and when people think about our permitting program, one of the things I keep hearing is how long it takes. Oh my God, why does it take so long? And I understand that there are anomalies, that there are there's difference in complexity, but how do we stack up with other states? How are we? I mean, are we the laggard on there? And I don't know who can answer this question.
So the CPS report highlights two states, Alabama and I believe Florida, and they have a time limit. And we contacted those states, and it's really how you look at the numbers. When they account for the dates, they counted for. Alabama says they complete their permits in 180 days. What they do is the 180 days is counted once the permit application is found to be complete. Then the process starts. That is doable with 180 days. The way we account our dates is from the day we submit the application comes in to the day the permit becomes effective. It's a lot lengthier process. What we have done recently, we have a senior tech that's going out, reaching out to all the states, and we have called in the EPA. We have been on the calls with all 50 states on a call with them and trying to find out what is their permitting process, how long does it take them to issue a permit. We also looked at the RCRA info database, and our preliminary data right now tells us the average permit, I want to caveat this, we have not really did the complete analysis, but the average permit is 4.3 years for all of the 50 states in the United States. It is not, our permitting process is within that realm. However, we have not gone back and down and figured out exactly which states, and we haven't done the complete analysis yet. But right now, the preliminary data shows 4.3 years for average permit in all 50 states.
Any other questions from my colleagues up here? Bill, Tom, Brian, anyone have any for staff?
I have a couple comments, but we haven't heard from the public for a long time, so I'll wait until then.
Good, very good. So with that, I've got one that I got before. And, okay, so I have three here. We'll start with the first one I got, which was Vicki Nguyen.
Hello, Director Rafael. Back in your initial review in February, you found that about 18% of the hazardous waste facilities in California were operating with outdated permits. How many facilities are still operating on those expired permits today? And I have one more question, which on the second part here. In the CPS report, the reviewers recommended DTSC hire about 35 people to help with the permitting process. what is the plan? Are you planning to hire more people?
Great questions. Okay, so I am actually, because those are fairly detailed, going to Rizgar, Brian, which one would you like?
The permit process is, as you may know, we have about 117 permitted facilities, and because they are on permits that have a 10-year tenure and duration, thank you, some fall off, some add on as we go. And I think you may have seen some of the reports that we put out that anticipate that with our current resources, the number of backlog permits actually will increase because we'll have such an inflow of expiring permits. So I don't know the exact count right now. I know.
So do you know the percent? It's 29 out of 29.
Yeah, 29 are backlogged right now.
Okay.
From currently, I don't know what that works out in terms of percentage for what you had done. And when I think about, is that okay or not? Of course, we talk about the timeliness and the intent to have quality permits. And the point we are, as I talked about, we're at this seminal moment right now where we are stepping back. We are taking staff out of permit production to refine our processes and procedures. So that comes at a cost. Making ourselves better is not an automatic switch. And so we have a number of these staff here and staff throughout, that some of them in the audience are out on the web, who have been taking many hours out of their day to address those 51 tasks. And that is acceptable right now. Making ourselves better is our expectation, and we have to commit the resources to do that.
So before we go to the second question that Vicki had, I want to ask Rizgar, can you come back up? So you did the math on your calculator. What percent, to answer Vicki's question, what percent are now operating on extended permits?
It's 24% out of the...
Okay. And can you explain what an extended, or some people call them expired permits, what does that mean? Does that mean they're operating without any oversight at all? What does that mean?
No, actually, they are operating within, they are legally operating facilities. Once the facility submits an application 180 days before the permit expires, that permit is extended. The laws and regulations of the permit is still in effect. So the facility still continues to operate as they should, and our enforcement folks go out there and inspect the facility just like any other facility. There's nothing, there isn't a difference to an expired permit or to existing permit.
Okay, so the enforcement folks have something to enforce. If they go out, it does not matter that it's an extended permit.
Of course, yes.
Okay.
In fact, the permit continues until we issue a new permit or make a new permit decision.
Okay, good, great question. Okay, and then the second question was about the, Vicki.
Sorry, one point, you said 24%. How many total hazardous waste facilities is that?
There are 117
Oh,
permit
20
facilities.
Yeah, but what was the number that were?
29.
29, just to be clear. And the resource issue CPS report, did it say 35 additional or it come to 35? I'm
I
not.
think that was read incorrectly. It's 20% increase in our resources. That,
Okay, to bring it up to 35 people, is that?
That's correct,
Actually,
up to 35
I want to
people.
be, I
So
want to be
there's an
very clear
addition
on
of-
that.
there's an
It's not
addition-
an additional 35 people.
no, there is not.
Oh.
There is an addition to 6 to 7 people.
Okay.
Be wise.
And what are we doing on that?
We're working with the director,
Mhm.
yourself, to redirect resources within Office of Permitting. We're backfilling some positions. We're working very closely with Steward, the cleanup program. In fact, we have a program with Steward's cleanup program to lend us some resources in the interim till we get the PYs. As you talked earlier, Debbie, we are in phase 2. We're make sure we have the fundamentals in place before we could reach out and ask for those positions. Unless the fundamentals are put in place, really we can't justify to ask for the resources. I know I need some resources, but I need to prove to you folks that we have the fundamentals, we have fixed the foundation first before we could reach out. However, we have reached out to the other programs, and some resources have been redirected to our unit, to our
Thank
office.
you. Brian, do you want to say anything more? Okay, thank you. Oh, please, go ahead, Stuart.
I do want to just talk a little bit about the resources and some of the behind-the-scenes work that Rizgar's been doing with me. And my shoulder's been hurting for the last few days, and that's because he's twisting my arm to get resources. But a little historical perspective, because of the governor's hiring freeze in previous years, we have had vacant positions that have gone unfilled. And that has had a pretty significant impact both on my program and on Brian's program. We now are able to fill those positions, and in filling those positions, we're filling them with an eye to help direct some of those resources to RISGAR until we can backfill and actually fulfill those needs more through the final budget and BCP process. So we do have resources available because we're hiring new staff. So you want to let.
Thanks, Stu. Ingrid Brostrom.
Ingrid Brostrom with the Center on Race, Poverty, and the Environment. And I actually have a rather lengthy comment letter that I submitted last night, but will also provide. So one of the primary issues that came to light for me in the CPS report was the fact that DTSC is operating under conflicting objectives. On the one hand, it acknowledges that under RCRA that it has an obligation to protect public health and the environment. On the other hand, it also used an interpretation of RCRA to see a role in maintaining and increasing hazardous waste capacity in the state in order to prevent illegal dumping. Now that creates a conflict whereby DTSC has an incentive to not be completely, to actually have a role in wanting to add permits or add capacity by approving permits. So I think that the objectives that DTSC is operating under does create a conflict, and that there's ways to avoid this conflict by relying on the enforcement program rather than any interest in maintaining or increasing capacity to prevent illegal dumping. And so I think that DTSC should not have a vested interest in either way for an outcome of a permit decision. I think that's very serious, and I think there needs to be more recommendations as to how to avoid that conflict of interest. The second issue is the criteria for when to deny a permit based on violations, on past violations. This is something that was universally suggested by stakeholders, industry, government, and public interest. It was very clear through the report that indeed there is no criteria of when to deny the permit, and there's no clarity on when violations would dictate a permit denial. However, the report did not include a recommendation to actually create that criteria. So number one, that should be a recommendation. I just want to note that the report talks a lot about whether or not there is an immediate or significant risk to public health due to violations, and that's not the standard. The law is very clear that a permit can not be denied when either there is a recurring practice, a pattern of violations, or when public health is impacted. And so I don't think the report looked at that difference. And we do agree that there should be some more categories of violations so that we know, that there are more serious ones, that there are ones that impact public health. But that does not mean that even things that don't necessarily impact public health immediately should not be factored, because it shows that a company presents a risk, that they have a problem with complying with conditions, and that would continue into the future. And so I think that is very relevant, even if it's not an immediate threat. Third, one of the questions that the report sought to answer was what factors should be considered and what should be measured. And so what I did not see in the report that I was expecting to see was where civil rights, where the equity, where the EJ, where cumulative impacts, where do those factors fit into the equation? Because apparently they don't. And instead, decisions are made, and then there's an attempt to show compliance after the fact with the civil rights laws, federal and state, and cumulative impacts, and all of that stuff. So I think there should be specific factors, and that should be identified in the process, and that, again, there should be set criteria for how those are looked at. EnviroStore was seen as an issue in terms of the data entry and the quality of the data entry. However, I think the ease of public accessibility is another big issue that was not identified, and that it is sorely deficient in terms of its ease of use and the types of information that the public wants to see. It is not readily available. And then finally, with the public participation process, there was a chart in the report. When you looked at the public participation part, there was no room for a change of course in the permit decision, nor was there actually any consideration of the comments, rather that they were received, that there was a response given, but not that they were actually considered and there was room for any changes based on public participation. And so I think that the chart needs to reflect that there is the consideration given, and in fact the opportunity for the department to change course given the public comments that are received. All right, thank you.
So thank you, Ingrid. And what is coming up for me as I listen to you with those great suggestions and observations, Ingrid is another person who has dedicated a lot of her impressive intellectual capacity to taking a look at DTSC and holding us accountable to meet our mission. So one of the things, Ingrid, that's coming up for me on this is that as we create these guidance documents that staff talked about, that they should not be created in a vacuum, that they need to be created with interested stakeholders taking a look to say, are we, when we're doing guidance documents and training on EnviroStore, when we're working with our IT folks on EnviroStore, we're not just making it user-friendly to us, but we're meeting the needs of the community as well. So I think that is a very good point. Not just, I mean, EnviroStore is just one example, but all the other ones you brought up as well, how there needs to be a development of these documents in a very public and transparent setting. Okay, so I've got a couple. One is from a gentleman watching in San Diego, who says, regarding the extensive management process review proposed by the permitting department and your consultant, do you anticipate significant impact to normal operations while the department addresses these very important but time-consuming reviews and modifications? And I think that's really what Rizgar was talking about. We like to call this, you know, fixing a moving train, or, you know, one of those race car drivers where you're at a pit stop, but the car in this case never stops. But Brian, do you want to, you mentioned it a bit, but is there anything else you want to say on that?
It's clearly the tough one. It is maintaining that balance of forward progress while at the same time confirming, compiling, expanding, improving. And so we are envisioning a team structure that will actually do this work, and more about that will come forth in the next meeting. We will talk about how to create the organizational support that makes this happen, and what the expectations of all of the permit staff will be, so that we don't try and stop the train, but we actually allow it to keep going. It's a tough challenge. It really is.
And, you know, and I think it speaks to Vicki Nguyen's question about the number of permits that are on extended permits versus up to date as being a difficult benchmark to use in the moment in time when we're trying to fix all process. So, and Brian did bring up the fact that that metric will be a challenging one, will not perhaps be an accurate reflection of the quality of work that's coming out or the kind of work that's going on in the next 6 months. Having said that, that metric is of incredible importance to us, and we must be judged on getting that number down in the future. In the next 6 months, my expectation is that number will not go down, because we're stepping back and we're putting all the processes in place. Once we have done that, then that number will be dropping. That is our commitment. So this question is an interesting one, and I think that a lot of staff, I don't know who wrote it, but a lot of staff would agree with it as well. It says, was staff aware of the problems within permitting, or was it due to the report? And if aware, why did previous management didn't start resolving the issues? So staff were absolutely aware. People in the department were aware, and they did the best they could. Now, I can't answer, nor do I find it productive to go back in time and say, what were people thinking? I can say that for this administration, one of the things the governor says, he wants to get stuff done. That's the G-rated version. He is not about smoke and mirrors. He wants institutionalized change. He wants good government. And so he brought me on to do that. And I take that task, I take that job very seriously. And I'm not about to do a cosmetic fix, a Band-Aid, so that the next director who comes is going to have to sit up here and say, I can't speak for what happened before me. We're going to hand this off after this administration as a very functional, well-oiled machine that is able to meet its mission in a accountable way, in a way that serves the needs and protects the health of Californians. So I appreciate the question, and we're fixing it for all time. We're fixing it for the future, fixing it, our foundation. Any other comments or questions? If you've got a card, give it to me. If you don't at this point, it's okay. Just come on up to the mic.
Marisela Marisela Torre, Kettleman City again, and I had previously turned in a card. Mr. Johnson, your village is failing the children in Kettleman City. I have been a teacher, and I can summarize what I just heard from this report, was if you're a rich polluter, you can continue to accrue violations, and you can ask for additional permits, and we're gonna ramrod them right through. That's what you're gonna get. And it seems like DTSC suffers from an appalling lack of being able to call a duck a duck. A chronic violator is a chronic violator no matter how you notify the public. If they can't follow the law, then you need to follow the law and deny permits, because that's what the law says. Expired permits are expired permits, not extended permits. Don't change the nature of what the law is supposed to be. I can't drive on an expired license. These facilities shouldn't be allowed to have expired permits and then call them extended. That's ridiculous. I would really like for the public to be made aware of what the ratio is for permit denial versus permit approval. Because from what I understand, it just sounds like we're trying to speed this up as fast as possible for these facilities, and public health be damned. As long as they're, taken care of, we're okay. And I also, like Ingrid, didn't hear anything to do with civil rights. Again, DTSC, as far as I know, is not exempt from the law. And if you are permitting the majority of these facilities in communities, vulnerable communities with people of color, with a lower socioeconomic standard, then you're violating the law. And I think it needs to say something about that as well. And finally, I think it's interesting how, I think it was Mr. Riesgar that pointed out proudly about the facility that you shut down in Rancho Cordova. It's interesting because it's closer to you, not communities like Kettleman City. And it wasn't, the largest toxic waste landfill in the western United States, I assure you that. But I'm wondering if there's a different standard for protection. If you live closer to Sacramento, which is of a higher economic standard, you get a better protection than if you're from a community like Kettleman City. Very interesting to note. So a lot of problems with the report as far as my view. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcella. Other comments? One. Oh, Maria.
Soy yo, María Saucedo, otra vez.
This is María Saucedo again.
Ahora entiendo a las personas que nos están ayudando.
She understands the people that are trying to help her.
Dicen que han ido a preguntarle a la gente en Kettleman City qué está pasando.
She says she has heard here that you guys went out and asked the public in Kettleman City on what's going on in her area.
Y yo
And
quiero
sh-
que sepan que la gente tiene miedo.
And that she wants everybody to know that the people are scared to speak up in the Cattleman area.
La última vez que tuvimos una junta en Kerman City sobre los comentarios públicos,
The last time they had a meeting in Cattleman City regarding the public,
yo defendí mi derecho como madre de un bebé que falleció.
she defended her rights as a mother that lost a child.
Saliendo de la escuela estaban 6 policías.
As she came out of that meeting, there were 6 police cars outside.
Yo no sé si me estaban ya esperando a mí o estaban esperando que hubiera algo más grande,
She doesn't know if they're waiting for her or if they're waiting for something more bigger to happen.
pero siempre que hay algo así, un comentario público, está el policía esperando afuera.
Every time there is a meeting at Cattleman's, there's always police officers outside waiting.
¿Cómo pueden esperar que vayan a preguntarle a la gente en Kerman City qué está pasando si les da miedo que los vayan a arrestar?
She said, how do you expect anybody to speak up at Cattleman because they're scared of the police?
Hace como un mes hicimos un cuestionario de salud en Kerman City. Hace como un mes.
About a month ago, they had a questionnaire in public.
Encontramos 19 personas con cáncer en una sola calle.
On one street, when she asked the public, and there was 19 people
una-
with cancer
Y una bebé de 6 meses con leucemia.
and one child with leukemia.
Y para mí todo eso es frustrante.
And as far as she's concerned, that's major.
Por eso la gente no participa porque tiene miedo.
A lot of the people will not speak up because they're scared to speak up.
Entonces, ¿cómo quieren escuchar la voz del pueblo si siempre que hay algo está el policía afuera?
How do they expect the public to speak out when every time there's a meeting, there's police cars outside?
Y pedimos que si van a preguntar, le den confianza a la gente que no vuelva a pasar lo mismo.
And she's asking if you're going to ask for the public to speak out, to please guarantee them there won't be no problems with the police.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and I'd like to just say that at the last public meeting we had, we specifically told the police we did not need their presence, and they were not there for that meeting. I cannot speak to all the other meetings because we have seen that police do sometimes come to public meetings. I can tell you that it's at DTSC, we have not asked for police. We have specifically asked that police stay away from our public meetings. So it is absolutely our commitment to you and to the people of Kettleman City that they feel safe and accessible to us without fear that they are going to have to answer to police. That is an unacceptable situation.
Y yo sé que hay mucha gente aquí que nos está apoyando, pero también hay mucha gente que no nos puede mirar por estar pidiendo algo para nosotros, para nuestra salud.
She says she's aware that there's a lot of people here trying to help her, but at the same time, there's a lot of people that are against her.
Yeah, no, I understand that. Thank you. Thank you,
Gracias.
Maria, for being here.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Other comments? Well, I'm looking at the time. It is 5 of 12.
Debbie, I had a couple of comments.
Bill, your floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks. First of all, some big picture perspective kind of in response to Rich's suggestion that we're all responsible for the hazardous waste, because I think there's some truth to that, but it obscures a greater truth that our hazardous waste really comes from decisions that have been made by those who design our products and industrial processes and those who make public policy. Permitting is part of a system that's supposed to assure that hazardous waste is handled safely from cradle to grave. And the reason why we now have a safer consumer products law is that this department realized that that wasn't acceptable to keep sending the waste to these graves. And that's why people have come here this morning all the way from Kettleman City, because they're sick of having the biggest grave be in their community. So the point of safer consumer products is to try to redesign our products so that they no longer are hazardous when they're thrown out. And that's why we're going to need a lot more, actually, than 5 products. We're going to need to expand that and have it, vigorously pursued and enforced. And we need a corollary on the industrial side, where a huge amount of that waste comes from. And if you look at lighting was the example used, you know, we can affect whether or not there are hazardous materials in our lighting. In fact, the California Energy Commission now has policies that are encouraging the bringing to market of energy efficient LED lighting that has an excellent color spectrum and has no hazardous materials in it. So we can make a difference on that through public policy, and it's also up to the companies that are actually designing the products and managing the big industries that are creating most of this waste. Most consumers have absolutely no control over that. And the reason why we have the Safer Consumer Products policy, and why I appreciate so much that Debbie's so dedicated to it, is that we want to get to a point where someone can go into a store and know that what you're buying off the shelf actually will not be harmful to you and your family and will not be hazardous when it comes time to throw it out. Right now, we have no assurance of that at all. Second point is to the permitting staff. I want to recognize the way in which you've taken this feedback very seriously, the amount of time that you've already put into processing it. It looks to me like in the areas where you could already take actions on the recommendations, you've done that. Others will take more time, and others will take more resources. And I'm glad to hear that there now are resources available to do some hiring. But I also want to say, and since I don't work for the government, I can say this, the department needs more resources. There have been many cutbacks over the years, and there need to be more people in permitting, there need to be more people in enforcement, there need to be more people in safer consumer products, and I'm sure other areas too. And they can't just go out and hire people. The legislature needs to approve that, and they can't even ask for it unless the Department of Finance lets them. And that is really not a very easy process at all. So for those of us who are able to, I think we want to engage in the process of asking the legislature and the governor to provide the resources this department needs to carry out its mission.
Thank you, Bill. Tom.
Well, Bill, thank you. I very much agree with your points on that, in particular your accommodation of the permitting staff of taking this on and working on the issues. I also appreciate all the people who are in the audience today and listening and participating, and I hope you will you will continue to be engaged in the process. When we looked at when we looked at the process, and again, Bill and I were outsiders and advisors, so we were neither commissioned to write the report nor were we work with the department. We asked the question that I think a number of the commenters asked, which is, are there any instances where the department has ignored a known health threat to allow a facility to continue to operate or be permitted? And we found no examples of that. What we found, in fact, was that in many cases, facilities that were going through the permitting process, and we all agreed that it had taken too long in many instances, the facilities that were actually going through a permit renewal process were sometimes subject to, if anything, greater scrutiny from the department from a compliance standpoint and an engineering standpoint to ensure that before the permit was reissued that the facility was operating correctly. One of the things you learned today, but we learned a part of the report, is almost 2/3 of the waste that's generated in California, the hazardous waste, is not point and an engineering standpoint to ensure that before the permit was reissued that the facility was operating correctly. One of the things you learned today, but we learned a part of the report, is almost 2/3 of the waste that's generated in California, the hazardous waste, is not being deposited in the ground, not going into a landfill, and is being either recycled or reused. And obviously that's something, hopefully with better product design, that we're going to be able to see less and less material that is landfilled and more of it that's not generated as hazardous waste, or if it is, that it's properly reused. Having said that, I think it is important to mention that there is also a value to us as a society in having adequate capacity that's operated in a proper manner, because that discourages people from engaging in a practice that was more common in the past, but I think may still occur, which we used to call midnight dumping, which is people taking hazardous waste and dumping it, in part because of the high cost of managing hazardous waste or the lack of capacity. So having adequate capacity is also an important goal. It should in no way trump the protection of public health, and we found no suggestion that it was doing that, but that is something that needs to be taken into account. The last comment I make, and maybe I can kick this into a question for Brian, which is one of the things that Rich found in preparing the report and his team, and I think that we heard from the permitting team, is that there needed to be a set of guidelines and a set of goals in terms of accomplishing the improvements to the permitting process. And my question to Brian is, what do you expect that sort of, when should we be revisiting this set of issues to see what progress we're making?
Tom, we are contemplating coming back to this body in 3 months with a progress report. You can also monitor this progress on our website, where we have listed all of the tasks that we are engaged in, and there are completion dates and anticipated completion dates so that you can understand and hold us as accountable as we are holding ourselves.
All right. Thank you. So it is now time to conclude our first public meeting. As I said, this does not supplant the other kinds of public meetings DTSC has. I want to thank all of you for coming. Thank you for those who are listening in on the web, participating with questions. I know I learned a good deal listening today, not only to my own staff, as also to the people who made the comments. I appreciate it. And this is not the only way to communicate with us. Anyone may call or email me or any of the people up here on the dais. We welcome your input. We welcome your participation in helping us achieve the important mission of this department. I want to say thank you again to Tom and to Bill and to Rich for the phenomenal work that the three of you did on this report. I want to thank the permitting staff for their integrity, for their pride in their work, and for all the creative discussions that have been generated because of this report. And thank you all, and I hope we see you in a few months' time.